Hey everyone. On the previous episode of the Conversation, I issued a correction for the anecdote given about the identity of the Nintendo employee who found Conker urinating on Fire Imps, a delightful fit of merriment. And while I correctly corrected the identity as Nintendo of America founder Minoru Arakawa, I stated that Howard Lincoln was president of Nintendo of America at the time. In actuality, Arakawa was president while Lincoln was chairman. And I don't know what the hell the difference is between those two positions, because I didn't go to the business school, the school for money. So I apologize for having desires in my life other than the hollow capitalistic pursuit of making money, alright? But in the interest of keeping peace, I would like to once again apologize to Minoru Arakawa.
Fourth of all, we're never really going to see 12 Tales Conquer
every
64,
single Nintendo employee who has
It's
ever
been more than 2 years since
on.
you first announced it. The only reason I think it's being delayed is because you needed more time to drop in subtle, vulgar jokes. Just to throw everyone for a loop, you should make the ESRB give it an adult rating. The game intro could involve Conker peeing on the naked corpse of Howard Lincoln.
I've taken a shit in my diaper for the first time! Wait, this isn't a diaper or shit! My parents just wrapped my buttocks in old Game Informer magazines from 2003! Same difference!
Hello, and welcome to the Conversation. I'm Hyle Russell.
And I am Gibbon.
And as our friend and fellow staffer, Cameron Regal, would put it, welcome to episode 904, Conker's Bad Fur Day, Part 3, Super Mario Advance 4. This is the final part.
And Knuckles, featuring Dante from Devil May Cry.
This is the final part of our Spotlight series for Conker's Bad Fur Day, and we will be discussing the nighttime portions of Conker's Bad Fur Day. My favorite part of the game, I don't know about your favorite, but
I think in general it's a lot of people's favorites. It's the portion of the game that a lot of people tend to remember and speak fondly of.
It's the people who actually get through the game remember this, and we'll discuss why certain parts of this are more memorable to people who haven't even gotten past the Great Mighty Pooh, for example. But yeah, this is my favorite part of the game. This is the part of the game I feel holds up to this day. And a lot of the daytime portions hold up too. But I'm saying this, as far as the tone goes, as far as the spirit of what they're trying to do goes, I feel like this is basically my template for what the Conker series should look like going forward. And I say that, after 20 years of not having a full sequel. But, hope springs eternal, and you never know. I am never one to dismiss any possibilities. So I'm still holding out hope for Donkey Kong Racing and Saberman Stampede. So,
ooh, a twofer.
I'd
say in general that this back third does hold up pretty well. It's certainly more coherent, and that's probably because, as we mentioned last time, this is where the game gets basically just completely linear. Once you get to Ooga Booga, it's fairly linear at that point, but there's still the possibility that you just didn't pick up cash and missed stuff and may need to go backtrack and do some other things.
Yeah.
And you say, people who actually got past the Great Mighty Pooh, you can actually do that pretty early. Be turned away at the gate of Ooga Booga. Yeah. Until you've collected enough cash from other areas. But at this point, once night falls, the game is just completely linear. There's none of that anymore.
See, I'm not talking about hardcore gamers or like Donkey Kong universe aficionados or people who would even listen to the conversation. I'm talking about the normies, Gibbon. I'm talking about the people who might have rented this at Blockbuster with an ID, or the people who played a friend's copy like for a couple of hours, or whatever. The people who, don't really progress that far in a game. They test it out like it's a Keurig pod.
But my counterpoint to this is the beauty of the chapter system, which means if they're renting a copy somebody's already completed, they can just skip to the good bits.
I'm just assuming nobody in their general vicinity is good at this game. My point is, Gibbon, that there would be people who didn't have to progress to the night portion to remember significant imagery from the night portion. And
that's fair.
So we'll get into all of that. But yeah, I think that this is definitely my favorite for numerous reasons, and we should just launch into it right now. So let's start with spooky. And it seems weird to talk about spooky in April when here in the Northern Hemisphere, all the flowers are blooming, trees are budding, birds are chirping, bees are buzzing. It's my favorite season, but I love Halloween. And I try to appreciate, something. I try to see the good in all seasons now. So, autumn, I really love Halloween. That's my favorite holiday. And spooky to me, if Rare hadn't done Grab by the Ghoulies, spooky would be the ultimate, I think, expression of Rare and Halloween to me. And it still is really up there. It
is pretty great.
And it even eclipses Ghoulies in a lot of places. This is ostensibly a parody of Bram Stoker's Dracula. Not the novel Bram Stoker's Dracula, but the Francis Ford Coppola Bram Stoker's Dracula movie from the early 90s, starring Gary Oldman as Count Dracula and Keanu Reeves, horribly cast as Jonathan, whatever his name is, the
Harker?
So, I love Keanu Reeves. I'm not trying to talk shit about Keanu because I know we're in the middle of the Keanu-sance, but not the best role for young Keanu.
I suppose that's fair. They should have got whoever they cast in that Dorian Gray film a few years later. He would have been good in that role.
I'm terrible at fan casting these things, so I know, Gary Oldman was a good Dracula. I think Keanu Reeves probably not, but
I suppose Ben Barnes. Yeah, I think Ben Barnes would have been good.
I did like Bram Stoker's Dracula for a couple reasons, and one of the reasons was that it actually was one of the first productions of the novel, reinterpretations of the novel, that utilize the actual history of Vlad the Impaler to merge it with the character of Dracula. Because it's debated, how much Bram Stoker was actually influenced by the real, quote-unquote, Dracula, Vlad the Impaler, and how much he just pulled that name from a book and kind of applied it to this fictional count.
A little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. Like early drafts, it was straight up fan fiction of Carmilla, the earlier vampire novel, with the same vampire investigator from that, who was later replaced with Van Helsing.
Hey, I mean, it worked for 50 Shades, so...
Yeah, it's true, yeah. That's very true. Long storied tradition, starting with earlier works such as Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Bram Stoker's Dracula, yeah. Bram Stoker's Dracula portrayed Dracula as Vlad the Impaler, who then succumbs to vampirism, and then, it flash forwards to the time period of the original novel. I like that interpretation of Dracula, and this is where the movie parodies work for me. The whole, I say the whole night portion, 2/3 of the nighttime portions of the game, the movie parodies work for me to this day. And I think that's because Bram Stoker's Dracula and Saving Private Ryan are broad enough that when you do shot-for-shot recreations of them, it doesn't feel as hacky and tired as, say, The Matrix. And that's just
take that back.
No, that's just my personal opinion. Because when you're homaging or just doing a shot-for-shot remake of a scene from Bram Stoker's Dracula, it works because it's a piece of literature that itself is becomes an adaptation that this is parodying. And Saving Private Ryan, it works because it's actually referencing D-Day and, a real historical event, only with the horrific imagery of squirrels getting mowed down. So those work for me, and I really like the way they use Bram Stoker's Dracula here as a springboard for just multiple horror tropes, but I think especially what they're going for here is Resident Evil, probably the original Resident Evil.
Yeah, I think parts of the layout actually mimic the original Resident Evil mansion a little bit.
So not only do we get a movie parody, but we get a video game parody, which I think works really well for Conker. But let's dial it back here and walk through this chapter bit by bit. So as you mentioned, this is when the game really becomes linear, super linear.
Yeah. Yeah, as I mentioned, there's no exploration, and not just in a macro sense where there's you drop the collectathon aspect of it at all. You're not collecting money to get through a gate anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And the levels aren't big and explorable. They are also pretty linear. And there's also a bit of a genre shift in dropping the collectathon aspect. We also drop sort of the platforming element to some extent, and we switch to third-person shooter.
Pretty much. I think becoming linear gives the game a greater degree of focus than it had before.
Yeah, this is the portion of the game that I could totally see being done by Telltale, in a sort of Walking Dead type setup,
And you're saying that not just because of the zombies.
Yeah, not just because of the zombies, but Telltale's episodic sort of story-based things where you've got some light decision-making and then there's gameplay linking everything. It's if they were gonna remake Bad Fur Day today, I could totally see it being done in a Telltale Presents sort of thing.
Well, that's why, too, Team Dakota, when they were doing Conker's Big Reunion in Project Spark, and they had the whole plan of having episodic releases, I think that's largely the idea probably spun out of this last chunk of Conker's Bad Fur Day, because it is pretty episodic and it is pretty linear, and that's, I think, how Big Reunion was going to be structured. And, again, one of the greatest shames of the DKU is we didn't get Conker's Big Reunion Episode 2 and Episode 3. Because,
well, you can blame that on the Minecraft acquisition.
And I do, and trust me, I will take it out on Steve tonight in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. But Big Reunion, for all the Conker fans who have not played Big Reunion, and I realize it's kind of hard to play it now if you don't have it, but if you have if you can get a physical disc of Project Spark and whatever,
which are super cheap on Amazon and eBay.
Yeah,
you could probably go find it for $5.
But
complete in box.
Big Reunion, for as truncated as it is, for it's just the first part of a story we don't get to see the ending of. It is my ideal, my complete, what I would want from a Conker sequel if I myself had no creative say in a Conker sequel. This pleased me to no end, and the more I've sat on it, the more I've ruminated on it in the years since, the more I love it. And so, Big Reunion to me, I think is born out of these nighttime portions, not just in the episodic structure, but also in the tone, because it does, it does engage in the childish, bodily fluid humor of the daytime portions, but I think Conker himself, not the Twitter handle of Chris Seaver, but Conker, the character, is very much informed by this part of the game. And it's not just brushing this away to like revert back to status quo of like the Conker in Big Reunion is not the Conker who would squish Bloopy. So
but we already talked about how out of character that was.
Oh yeah, we don't need to go over Bloopy again. Although we will. I know we will because we can't help ourselves. Let's talk about the music really quick because I know
it's so good.
Yes,
so,
I know I said we would, pay tribute. We would crush that dinosaur for Robin Beanland. Damn it.
We're certainly going over him.
Yeah, but I know I said we would talk about it on this episode, but I really just want to single out the spooky chapter because this is really where I noticed Robin Beanland for the first time, and I was like,
oh yeah,
holy shit.
God, he outdid himself in this chapter. The music in this chapter is so good. I can't overstate how good the music is in this chapter. God.
For Rare's 35th anniversary last year, they released a digital album of songs that they have the rights to, popular Rare songs from Rare games that, Microsoft owns the rights to. Mm-hmm. And so basically what this would amount to would be you would have maybe one song per game, and then some of the bigger, more beloved games would get 2 songs. And Conker's Bad Fur Day had the Windy theme, very iconic. And then it also had the theme from Spooky, which seems like an outlier because a lot of the fan base, especially back when Conker came out, gravitated towards the rock solid nightclub rave song. And I think Spooky is the best song in this game. Definitely,
I agree. But also, you bring up an interesting point where most of the pre-release promotional material featured that one nightclub track from Ooga Booga.
And I think that was just more emblematic of the era where like that song would be like that was really big, and that was like right around like the peak let's do ecstasy in the club kind of lifestyle. And now we're all about getting our blood sucked out by our undead ancestors. So it's just a cultural shift. This is, I think, no Halloween playlist is complete without this song. It's just perfect. And it's by the way, I'm speaking, of course, about the song that plays when Conker is a bat and is, flying around the mansion. But it just hits all the right tones.
It's
I can't.
So good.
I wish I was more literate in music rather than just being like, I like that. That makes me happy. Good song, Robin Beanland. But I mean, it is what it is. I think that you hear a lot of the DNA of Sea of Thieves in this song.
Oh, yes. I think in particular the Merchant Alliance tune, when you go near their booth, when it starts up, you can hear sort of notes of this spooky music there. It's very evocative of the same sort of thing.
And now in the ghost ship battles, too, you really hear a similar through line, which is rare for Robin Beanland because he is such, as we say, a musical chameleon that he reinvents himself like a modern-day Harry Nilsson. Look it up, kids. But basically, Robin Beanland's output is like the track list of Nilsson Schmilson. So it's the Coconut Song guy. You know him. But when you do hear like similarities in a Beanland song, you're like, whoa! It's like he's calling back to his own work. He never does that. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So before we get into actually discussing Conker's journey here in this chapter, was it like we mentioned in the Ooga Booga chapter, how you can clearly see where it came from in 12 Tales.
Yeah.
Was Spooky invented whole cloth for Bad Fur Day?
Yeah, so when I was sitting down to sort of see if I could do 1-to-1 level comparisons for those, Spooky was a bit of a stickler because for a while it seemed like it was going to be the biggest section of the game that was invented out of whole cloth, but then in Live and Reloaded, some of the stuff that they added to the chapter kind of made me think otherwise because to give a brief overview of the opening of this chapter, as a nice segue into that, you wake up at the bottom of the Windmill Hill at night, and you go through the passage in the waterway that's been opened up from your misadventures with Mr. Barrel, and you come out in this sort of spooky area where there's a pier on the far side of a lake that this river's feeding into, and you can see Greg the Grim Reaper harassing some catfish, and there's just sort of this lone light and a pathway leading up, and that's just sort of this first area of spooky. In Live and Reloaded, they expanded this area a little bit, not just the waterway leading out there, which has been kind of made a bit bigger, but the pier now has a little village around it. And the whole area is filled with these new spooky doll enemies, which sort of reminds me of one of the 12 Tales levels, which was this sort of Christmas-themed area that had a snowy mountain with a path leading down to this toy village populated by googly-eyed toys. And it's like, did they really turn the happy-go-lucky Christmas town with the googly-eyed train and Conker wearing a little propeller beanie into spooky, where he's shooting zombies in the face with a shotgun?
Probably not.
Did they do that?
But it's a good theory. It's a good working theory.
Like you say, probably not, but it's an interesting parallel, the structures of the levels. Of course, I can't say this with any authority because we haven't actually seen the 12-Tale world in question. Yeah. But just from what we have seen, there's some interesting parallels to draw there.
Yeah, but yeah, Greg is there. He's swiping at these catfish, and I just love the stupid logic that catfish would also have these rules applied to them that cats get, and that Greg would be just in his downtime, which how much downtime does a Grim Reaper have? But in his downtime, he's just mindlessly antagonizing the catfish because he's just pure spite at this point. But yeah, Conker encounters him, and as we mentioned last time, if you didn't die before this would be the first time you meet Greg, which is weird to think about.
As unlikely as it is that you're not going to die before you get here. That can happen.
And this is why I think being a perfect player, infallible player, is not the authentic way to experience Conker. You need to die before this.
Yeah. Again, if this were being remade today, there would be a forced death sequence at some point earlier in the game.
It's almost odd that there isn't. And I remember when we first had this discussion back in 2001, it was like, well, surely you have to die at some point, right? And we were, examining it, and we came to the conclusion that no, you can actually get to Greg without dying, which is odd. But yeah, Greg basically says, yo, I have a problem. That's not verbatim, but hey, there are zombies over yonder, and zombies are another problem for me, the Grim Reaper.
Yeah,
because
if there's one thing he hates more than cats, it's the undead.
Because they're breaking the rules, and so he's as the Grim Reaper, which I really like this because you never see this in zombie fiction. Especially the template of zombie fiction post Romero, where it's okay, so because usually zombie fiction is presented from a purely science-based standpoint, and you're not really getting into the spiritual aspect of it, post Romero. It's okay, so how does that work for something like the Grim Reaper when you've got zombies? And the answer is he's fucking pissed. That's what. And he needs some help. And so he entrusts Conker with a shotgun, and he's like, go take care of these zombies for me. And so this is the introduction to the zombies. This is a less terrifying sequence for me than what comes later with the zombies. But this is basically just to introduce you to the concept. There's a lot of seeding in the nighttime portions that I appreciate. There is actually good story structure. Chekhov's gun and whatnot.
Yeah.
They set things up and they pay them off.
It's good gameplay structure too, because like I said, this is the shift to third-person shooting, and they introduce you to that with these slow-moving enemies that can only melee attack you, and there's plenty of places where you can like get up on top of a tomb or a mausoleum or a headstone or something to shoot them from. Which will not be the case later in the game.
No. Here it's very manageable. And so, really quick about me, Gibbon. Let me explain my philosophy and personal views on zombies. So, I know zombies are very popular. They're still popular. We've kind of passed the point of peak popularity for zombies in our pop culture.
Yeah.
We're kind of on the downswing again. But I would say Conker kind of got ahead of the zombie craze a little bit. That really kicked off after 9/11, and there's a lot of think pieces about the correlation there, but it really like got started again with, I think, the remake of Dawn of the Dead, the Zack
I was going to say
Snyder.
28 Days Later.
But then are those zombies? I mean, it's all, I think.
Well, that was the origin of the zombies as a virus subgenre.
That was the original Romero films too. It just made it more explicit in
Oh, sorry. 28 Days Later was the origin of fast zombies.
Yes.
So
yes, but then fast zombies paved the way for a resurgence of traditional slow zombies, or the Romero traditional, because traditional zombies are, of Haitian folklore, which I vastly prefer.
But either way, yes, it was ramping up in the early 2000s and sort of peaked in the mid 2000s and then sort of plateaued with a slow decline up to present day.
I would say the peak was late 2000s with The Walking Dead and the launch of that.
Oh, yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah. And then they just that show became ironically a decaying, shambling corpse, and just well, my thing with zombies is I hated them because when I was a kid, I saw the original Night of the Living Dead on TV without any explanation what it was, and it was just the most horrifying thing, and it made me it gave me a complex, right?
That's like me watching late night sci-fi and Alien coming on, and instead of me getting a complex, I fell in love. But maybe that's a different sort of complex.
Yeah, something about zombies, just like I think it's just like the notion of like either the rapid societal collapse, which now that we've been through the pandemic, whatever, but or it's just right? You're becoming something that you have no control over, or your loved ones are becoming something that you have no control over. Either way, the kernel of the idea was unsettling to me, and then I just got irritated with the genre post Conker's Bad Fur Day, when it was just, oh, we have the zombie template, let's just do the zombie template. And while you can do inventive things with it, ultimately I found that people weren't, and it was just like, okay, a zombie story has to be this apocalyptic scenario, it has to be this thing and that, and we're not gonna and it has to be super cynical and just drenched in
and people are the real monsters and yada yada yada.
We are the Walking Dead. How profound is that? So I hate zombies from both sides at this point. Like
I actually think the pinnacle was Shaun of the Dead, with just all the self-referential humor and zombie genre in jokes that if you just lived in it like I had, because my ex-wife would just loved this stuff. I was just had a veritable Where's Waldo time throughout that entire film.
And like anything, you can do inventive things with it, and that's what the original Night of the Living Dead was. That's what, the original Dawn of the Dead was. There's nothing like it at the time, and now there's plenty like it. But
yeah.
So anyway, all that being said, zombies, it unnerved me, and I'm not one to seek out zombie gameplay. Games where you are in the zombie scenario, this situation where you're in this apocalyptic undead wasteland. So to have that in a DKU game was something that was hard to overcome. This was a chapter that gave me a lot of challenge back in the day, just finding the nerve to get through it. Because it's okay, it makes me sound like I'm pathetic, and I am, but
no, I gotcha. This was a terrifying chapter.
And the thing is, it's Conker's Bad Fur Day, but they play this extremely straight. And the zombies, they're squirrel zombies, but they are terrifying. And I think almost the fact that they are squirrels makes it even more terrifying than you would assume. Because they're decaying squirrels with eyeballs hanging out, and
because like most average person isn't necessarily going to have seen like an actual decaying human corpse, so a zombie depiction on screen is just like, I know that's a person in makeup, and I'm not sure how realistic that is, but I'm pretty sure almost everyone's at least seen like a dead squirrel on the side of the road or something.
Right, and what would happen if that dead squirrel then rose up and came after you and made these horrific gurgling noises while they pursued you,
And we should mention that we were just gushing over how amazing the music was earlier. The music is not playing in this section of the game. It is kind of dead silent with just the zombie groans and screams coming at you.
Yeah, in both zombie sections, it's a lot more akin to like the mine shafts in Donkey Kong Country, where you have more ambient noise than you do any music, and it's just a similar thing. And like you'll occasionally hear like child laughter in the background, and they'll throw in all these unsettling things just designed to unnerve you. And I guess what? I never played Eternal Darkness on the GameCube because there would be no way I could handle that. I'm not a horror guy.
Big Lovecraft fan.
I love Halloween. I love so much about like imagery and like iconic characters and folklore and mythology. But as far as horror movies go, not for me. Not for me. And I
gotcha.
So this was being completely thrown into hostile territory for me. And it definitely eases you into it, and it kind of makes you comfortable with it, which is why what happens then at the end of this chapter, it makes it all the more upsetting when you realize, oh God, now I'm really in it. But this initial cemetery scene where the zombies are rising up, it's fairly straightforward. You can hop on a tombstone. They can't get you. You just shoot them, and then you shoot enough, and then Greg will open up the gates to the mansion itself. So not a problem. And of course, we should mention the tombstones all have hilarious names. A
lot of these are like parodies of people on the dev team and stuff, right?
Well, no, I think it's like just like IP. Isn't it like IP freely?
There is also that sort of stuff, but I think there's some cheeky references to people on the team as well.
Like IB floppy is that's the one that makes me laugh because I am 8 and I don't know, something about the word floppy in that context. Just will always please me.
Yeah. So before we progress to the next section, we should provide a little more background, because while you're down on the pier and Greg is giving his little rant at you about undead, he specifically mentions that these are your ancestors, are Conker's ancestors, are these undead, and one of them is up on the house in the hill. And to which Conker sort of isn't really listening to Greg and just sort of picks up like, oh, ancestral home on House of Hill. Undead? That's pretty much like dead, which means I should get the inheritance, right? And there's still this, like, nominally this focus on getting money.
Yeah.
While he makes his way through these scenarios.
This is kind of the last part of the game up until, well, no, because obviously the very end is all about money, but I think...
No, it still comes up, because like in the next chapter with the little girl, he's like, oh, maybe I can get a reward from her parents or something. Okay. Like, they still sprinkle it in there, but it doesn't come up mechanically much after this at all.
Yeah, definitely it, in its war, it becomes much less of a focus. But I think that, yeah, this is where Conker is kind of forced to confront other things and is not really looking to line his own pockets or lack thereof so much.
Yeah. There's actually a lot of lore dropped in the back third of the game, starting with this chapter. Because we talked a little bit about how the manual and the story just is like multiple pages long and has all of this stuff that doesn't seem like it actually pertains to much of anything in the daytime levels of the game.
Yeah.
And that's because it doesn't. It's pretty much all to do with these last 3 chapters.
Right.
And you start getting this sort of dripped in tale of Conker is actually from this old distinguished line, which have been around for a while. There's like headstones and tombstones scattered throughout the chapter that have dates in like the 1700s or whatnot. Like, this is an old family, and they've been around for a hot minute. Which, speaking of those old family members, when Conker knocks on the door, he is greeted by, I love this character. He's so great. What are we going to call him? Are we going to call him Count Batula, Count Concula? He's called a couple different things in a couple different places.
Just like Dracula or Vlad Tepes or Vlad the Impaler or Dracul or, you know, but I think DK Vine goes with Batula as our preferred nomenclature. So let's just go with that. I certainly can't go with Concula because my brain will just reject it.
Yeah. And it's like you said, they play it pretty straight while also lampooning the heck out of it. So he's talking in the ridiculous accent, and Conker's like, oh, just let me step over this threshold. I'm sure that wasn't important at all. Anyway, how are you?
Yeah.
Sort of thing.
So when I was a kid, hated zombies, but loved vampires. And my love of vampires was pretty much like Dracula. The Count was my favorite Sesame Street character. So something about vampires I thought were super cool, probably because they just wore capes and they got to stay up all night. So that's why I became a Batman fan. But
this is actually one of the longer cutscenes in the game. It's the intro to
super
this
long. It's surprisingly long, but
it's like 7 minutes long.
It's basically just them doing the dinner scene from Bram Stoker's Dracula. And to bring up Cameron again, Cameron has a funny observation that the dinner scene in this game comes off more straight-faced than it does in the film they're parodying. So it seems less ridiculous here than when it's Keanu and Gary Oldman.
Because in the film, they're sort of hamming it up for the atmosphere, but in this, it's just played completely straight.
Yeah.
Like, Conker steps in, Batula's like, oh, yes, welcome, welcome, here, let me lead you to the dining room. Oh, you'll see there's some... And he's, like, explaining the gameplay necessitated, like, holes in the mansion. He's like, oh, yes, I had the far wall knocked out. I was thinking of turning this all into a rec area. And, just...
But
just
also, it's this is where the game becomes eternally funny for me, because we could talk about how the humor of Bad Fur Day is of its time and how some of it is just juvenile and crass and you might outgrow it. But there's a subtlety to the humor here that I think is just magnificent, especially when Conker does the Jim face to the camera. The Jim from The Office face, where he, like, Batula is just going on and Conker just side-eyes the camera like, what the hell? It's ahead of its time, actually. It's like before all of the, like, mockumentary TV sitcoms. Conker was like, this was before the UK Office.
Just listening to this old coot go on, and I think at this point, Conker sort of has this vague idea that he's related to this guy somehow, but Batula has no idea. So Conker's sort of commenting on the paintings on the wall, which depict various squirrels with pointy teeth or werewolf features or whatnot.
So there's a lot of subtle world building here. And it's all being done through this parody of Bram Stoker's Dracula, which, you know, I think as far as, like, Dracula adaptations go, the only other parody of this I can think of offhand is The Simpsons, when they did their Treehouse of Terror.
Treehouse of Horror.
Whatever. Treehouse of Terror sounds better. Yeah, I think it was the fourth one they did. You know, this was back, you know, peak era Simpsons.
Yeah, I remember, with Mr. Burns. Yeah.
But it was Bart Simpson's Dracula, and Mr. Burns was the Gary Oldman Dracula with the weird, poofed up, bouffant hair. And so that was my introduction to that version of Dracula. Like, I saw that parody before I saw the movie, and then there was Bad Fur Day. So I'm a sucker for this iteration of Dracula, this weirdo iteration of Dracula. So to hang Batula, the character Batula, on this mold, or to, like, inject Batula into this mold, I should say, is really, I think, a stroke of genius, because it really lets him be a flagrant weirdo in a way that just having him be Bela Lugosi or Christopher Lee wouldn't allow you.
Yeah. And so while Batula's doing the Dracula thing, the villagers come knocking at the door with their stakes and pitchforks. And Batula's like, oh crap, okay, you know what, Conker, I was just gonna kill you and drink all your blood, but you might be a bit more useful tonight. And Conker's like, wait, could you back up a second? What was that?
Which,
was like,
how dense is Conker, who just fought zombies, and he's like, at this point, I'd be like, suspecting he's a vampire, right? But
yeah,
having never been feasted on by a vampire, I can't say for sure what I would do.
Yeah. And it's at this point that Conker gets attacked and kind of wakes up listening to Batula giving him some instructions. And the camera is first person for a while and then pans back out and reveals that Conker's been turned into a bat minion.
Yeah,
who has been tasked with grabbing some of the roaming villagers who have infiltrated the mansion.
Conker essentially becomes a vampire, but like a baby vampire stuck in bat form. A minion of Batula, who is the head vampire, you know. So, a lot of fun lore here, though, where Batula reveals himself to be a crusader in the Milk Wars, one of the Kulos of Konk. And obviously this plays on, like, the real history of Vlad the Impaler, and then spins a Dracula character out of that. But it's just this great little bit where this is the first time the Milk Wars are referenced in game, and he talks about when they had when they were allies with the Panthers.
Yeah. And there's a headstone for Conkula, and it's not mentioned in game whether Bacula and Conkula are the same person, but it leans towards that. But there's a mausoleum in the back of the mansion that reads 1776 with no death date.
Yeah.
So, yeah. He's been around for a while.
Yeah, and like I said on the last episode, I did do a video expose on the character of Count Bacula / Conkula, so you can check that out on our YouTube channel. I pretty much go into all the possible lore implications of that tombstone and everything else around the character. But I really like him. I like that even though he explains who he is and that he's an ancestor of Conker and all of that, I like how there's just so much we don't know, and it's left for you to speculate on. And we know what we need to know, but there's just it really makes me want to see that Milk Wars game, which ostensibly would have been Conker getting medieval. So
yeah. It's also after he drinks some of Conker's blood that he realizes he's related, and so he's like, yes, I believe I'm your great grandson, something like that.
Grandfather, or
grandfather.
Yeah.
You're my, and he goes, welcome to the family, sort of thing.
And Conker becomes a vampire bat and is entrusted by to round up the villagers who are trying to. I like how the villagers periodically just storm Bacula's mansion. They're like, "All right, we got to take care of this guy. This is a problem."
Yeah.
A lot of things you can fill in the blanks on as far as the day in the life of these villagers who just live in the shadow of this centuries old vampire who's just been terrorizing people. And it's weirdly the weird inconsistencies of the Panther Kingdom and Willow Woods or whatever aside, I love that there's this old European vibe to it where
yeah
I mean it's. And I think these villagers were reused as the sort of template for the Frenchies in the multiplayer.
Yeah, they're totally the same models for the Frenchies in some of the multiplayer modes.
But we're here,
which has some interesting implications.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say here they're supposed to be more Romanian, right? Or
Well, not necessarily. So there's some more lore stuff that you kind of have to piece together from external things in the big map of the concept art of the game world. This whole mansion thing is referred to as the Dark Place, which in the manual it talks about the Cullas of Conk after they were betrayed and defeated. They banished to the Dark Place. So this is sort of where they were driven to after the Panther King took over, sort of thing. So it's pastiching Dracula and Romania and stuff, but this isn't actually where they're from, so it doesn't necessarily have to be there.
Squirrels are actually Romanian or Eastern European, but it's all a pastiche and a pastiche upon a pastiche.
Yeah. With the original, I believe, villagers with pitchforks imagery coming from one of the Frankenstein films.
Right.
So
that's what I say. This is just, I think, a perfect blending of so many horror tropes. And it's, that's why the zombie stuff works for me, because the zombie stuff actually injects horror into it. But before that, it's basically just the monster mash for me. It's fun. It's vampires and a little bit of Frankenstein mixed in, and you got the one werewolf squirrel in the portrait, which you know, it like says, oh, there's werewolf squirrels too. What I wouldn't give to see that, and you know, it almost makes me want to see the more of the supernatural side to Conker. Like my dream idea for a Conker sequel was going all in on a supernatural element and basically parodying Dante's Inferno or the Divine Comedy of Conker. Like, granted, this would just be Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, but with Greg, you know. But it just so have great. Conker go into the afterlife realms, and actually, Other Bad Day did touch upon this a little bit, but. Yeah, have Conker like go into hell and purgatory in search of Barry, and you know, really play up what spooky kind of got started here. So yeah, Conker's a bat, and he has to pick up the villagers who were like throwing their pitchforks at him and fly them to the meat grinder, where he drops them into the meat grinder. And then the blood.
Did we mention there's a giant meat grinder?
You did mention it. You alluded to it at least. But yeah, the meat grinder, they get fed into it. Their blood and guts, they go through this vat, and then the vat funnels the blood into Batula's waiting mouth. And Batula at this point has gone into his own bat form, and he's hanging upside down. Above the meat grinder in a very poor
massive
position. Yes.
And
he becomes more massive the more he feeds. And then, of course, that creates the very Looney Tunes-esque scenario in which you ultimately inadvertently defeat Batula, because I don't think Conker is trying to...
Yeah, I've seen some people talk about how this portion of the game is also out of character for Conker, for him to be kind of dropping these villagers to their doom in this giant meat grinder thing. But I kind of read this as like he's a thrall of Batula. He's doing what he's been ordered, sort of thing.
I think he has very little free will at this point. He's probably conscious, like somewhere in the back of his mind, like, oh God, what am I doing? But he can't. He can't stop himself.
Yeah, this is Batula being done in by his own gluttony, basically. Batula saying "oh shit" as he falls to his doom is actually the only uncensored line in Live and Reloaded, by the way.
Yeah, that's weird. Which is why it was originally called Conker Live and Uncut, and they had to back away from that title because it obviously was far more cut.
So Chris Seaver, Chris Marlowe, and Sean Pyle were on a charity stream the other weekend for game preservation and history, and they actually talked about that a little bit. In that the uncut part was going to be because they were going to be adding more content to the game, to the single player game, and like an uncut, we put the deleted scenes back in sort of thing. And we talked about the movie parodies in this game and how a lot of them are just scene for scene, shot for shot remakes. And while they somehow managed to get away with that on the N64, they were told that if they did uncut and inserted new stuff into the game but left the rest of it the same, they would start getting in legal trouble for hewing too close to the source material, which is why it ended up being billed as new game Live and Reloaded, this multiplayer based thing that had a remake of Bad Fur Day attached to it as a bonus. And that's why it was marketed that way, because then it was prior art and they wouldn't get in legal trouble.
Yeah, it's amazing how 2001 you could you could get away with this. It's kind of like the internet at the time, where like nobody's really paying attention. And it's like this little bespoke N64 game. Nobody's paying attention. The people behind the Matrix, or the people who own the rights, I should say, to the Matrix, aren't going to care. And granted, there's a lot you can get away with it with parody law that I think it was probably just them being overly cautious. I can't imagine any of the stuff in Conker would hew close enough to actually get them in trouble. Maybe the design of the of Heinrich, the xenomorph, because it's pretty blatantly a xenomorph.
Yeah, it is pretty blatant. And like they did obviously add stuff, like they had Conker in a Van Helsing outfit for this chapter in Live and Reloaded, but that's just a visual gag. It's not like they didn't parody any scenes from the movie or anything. And they did have like new movie parodies in the Chapter X multiplayer content as well. But again, like it's all sort of like, oh look, it's a thing from a movie. We're not like recreating shots from the film sort of way.
As Ray Day Pinball says in the live stream, wants us to point out, don't forget that they also added the anus cam when Conker is a bat. So you can actually see the poop drop out of Conker. Super helpful, actually.
I don't know. I didn't have a problem with it. But
we're not going to talk about Live and Reloaded too much on this episode, because there will be a Live and Reloaded episode one day, where we'll get into that. But I have to say, I did not like the Spooky changes all that much. I felt like the presentation of Spooky was perfect in Bad Fur Day, and having him wearing a Van Helsing costume dates it in a way that it feels more timeless with the parody they're doing on the N64.
Yeah, it kind of dates it the same way the Matrix bit is dated at this point.
And, you don't know, like, when you're doing a sort of contemporary reference, if it will hold up or if it will just become an immediate, like, relic. And, obviously the Matrix has, at least the first one has, stood the test of time, but I think Matrix parodies have not. Maybe it'll come back around again, I don't know, but Hugh Jackman's Van Helsing is definitely not a movie that I don't think has any cultural weight or relevance.
Which itself has Hugh Jackman as Wolverine references in it. Oh man, good times. I might go watch that again after this.
Although Live and Reloaded is amusing when you just view it as Conker in 2005, remembering the events of 2001, and that is actually the canonical,
making himself cooler. Yeah.
That is a canonical rationale behind that game in supplementary material, which you discovered. So that was our fan.
I say years. I discovered. I just read the manual, and it says, this is a bunch of the guys getting together at the pub to reminisce about the events of Bad Fur Day.
Which Bad Fur Day itself was Conker reminiscing the very next day about the day before. So I like how every few years he just reminisces about this day, and it gets more abstract and more exaggerated the longer he sits on it. So, like, he's dressed as
the
Hugh
game
Jackman. Itself
the next day, the guide sometime later on, Live and Reload, and so on and so forth. But so after Batula falls to his gluttonous demise, Conker turns back from being a bat, and the villagers skedaddle because zombies begin to overrun the premises.
Well, the villagers kind of disappear, and then presumably most of them are dead. And then you've got the zombies then storm it, which I always took that Batula had some sort of like protective spell or something over his mansion, and then once he died, the zombies could break in.
And you need to go collect some keys from around the mansion, and this is the return of the keys that we saw in the tutorial areas in Hungover. This is the only other time this mechanic comes into play.
The googly-eyed keys, yes, which also come back in Project Spark. So,
this is a hard portion. This is probably the hardest portion of this chapter, because there is one set of health refill chocolates in this entire chapter. They don't activate until like the third key, because you have to do these in sequence.
Yes, it's hard. It is terrifying because not only, again, the music's gone, you have ambient noise, the sound of the zombies, weird discordant sound effects like child laughter. And the zombies will just like run out from the corner. You'll just be going, and then you'll run headfirst into the zombies. There aren't tombstones here in most places for you to hop up on and do the headshots. You've got to like do it from a distance before they reach you. They can come up from behind.
Yeah.
It is a challenge, and it's
if you don't stop moving. Oh, and when you're carrying the keys, you can't bring out your weapons because
Yes.
they're big carryable objects. If you don't stop moving, they can't catch up to you, but that's assuming you don't like make a wrong turn or run into a wall because of camera angles or something or whatever, because you're going through some tricky hallways and bits of this. It's it can be difficult. It took me a few tries. I did manage it, but I was on 1 health for a lot of it.
And again, in the live stream, Raid A Pinball says, was it just me, or were there like 0 clues or information on what you're supposed to do at this point? And
So they direct you to the door, and if you go over to the door, it says, hey, you're going to need to grab some keys, and sort of gives you a brief, like, maybe you should go in this direction. And after you grab the first key and bring it back, it does a little cut scene of, like, the bridge into the back garden opening up, so you get... you kind of got to go over there. And after that, like, the ladder extends up to the rafters, so you got to go up there. But it is vague. It isn't as vague as, like, Ooga Booga for the bloopy section, where it's just, like, there's no direction whatsoever in that area. No. They kind of vaguely tell you what you need to do here, but it doesn't hold your hand about it.
It's basically an escape room with zombies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and... this is where you get to explore the entirety of the mansion, though, on foot. So, you get to see and, savor, if you can, all the little details, including there's this one really creepy bit in this sequence where a straggler villager is seemingly being chased by zombies, and she like falls through the hole in like near the dining area, and then just disappears.
Yeah.
You have to be in the right place at the right time to see it. And,
oh, man.
And you're like, did I really just see that? And then there's been some debate. Was she like a ghost, or is she just a villager who is still in a mansion? And I think it's supposed to be that, but it's, again, left unexplained, and, not everybody even sees it. So it's just this really weird, like, little extra flourish they added to it.
One thing I think not a lot of people know is that you can like clear the area of zombies. Once you grab the key, more will spawn, but while you're prepping the area to grab the key, you can clear the area of existing enemies. So
that helps.
Certainly helps.
Yeah, that does. And it's, I think my biggest problem with this, and this took me the longest time when originally playing Bad Fur Day. Like I remember having sweaty ass palms, just like white knuckles, trying to get through this, trying to find. And I had to play it during the day. I could not play this at night. It had to be broad ass daylight. Curtains fully wide open, sunshine beaming through, in order to have the courage to get through this. But yeah, I just wanted to get through it fast, so I never actually bothered to stand around killing all the zombies. I wanted to get that key. I wanted to get all 3 keys and get the hell out of there.
Yeah, I didn't think it was too bad, but I did take my time and do my prep about it. So I think just being exposed to so much zombie horror stuff while I was married just made me a bit blasé about all this.
Sure. Before we move on, I do want to address, like, the game never explains why there are zombies, where they came from. So this isn't a case of like, oh, there's a Romero plague, there's this Walking Dead plague, or it could be magical, it could be scientific, it could be runoff from the professors, lab that somehow contaminated the soil here and caused the dead to rise. It's never explained, but it seems to be a kind of contained situation. You know,
Yeah.
this doesn't seem to be like, oh, zombies are creating other zombies. It just seems to be, yeah, there are zombies, mostly from this graveyard down below.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty much. And it's specifically just on like the I guess now Conker's house's grounds. Because who else is going to own the place now, really?
Well, yeah, but then like a couple hours later, he gets an upgrade from this, so he doesn't really even need this anymore.
Yeah, I suppose that's true, yeah.
Plus, did Bachelor leave a will? Probably not. Definitely not leaving anything to Conker, so...
I mean, like, does he need to leave a will in this case? Conker's like the only living relative that we know of.
I think what will happen, or what did happen, was they're going to turn this into like a tourist destination and a hotel, like Castle Braun. We're like, oh, come see Dracula's castle. Come spend the night. Ooh, spooky. You might get your neck sucked.
And not in a good way. But yeah, once you open up the door, Mr. Barrel has been sort of cowering in the corner the whole time, and Conker gets a, I have an idea look on his face, and proceeds to ride him out of the area.
Yeah,
and cross the waterway down by the pier, which had some strong currents preventing you from going in that direction before. And we mentioned some returning elements from Hungover, which is appropriate because this dumps you out back in Hungover next to the last bundle of cash you can pick up in the game after it doesn't matter anymore. Which was the first one you see in the game, actually, but couldn't get to.
I do want to move on, but I do think we should point out you also steamroll over skeletal worms as you're going down the hillside.
So, yeah, we mentioned those worms when you're going up to the top of the windmill to encounter Mr. Barrel for the first time. There is this winding path leading up to the mansion between it and the graveyard that has these skeletal versions of these worms, which I guess they're not really worms in a morphological sense if they have skeletons, but they're, I guess, worms in a classical worms of the earth sense, the same way that dragons are worms classically.
I mean, it's like those Halloween decorations that are so popular right now where they have skeletal versions of everything, but with like you have like all these skeletal pets, but they have like ears and like cartilage as part of the skeleton, and you're like, that's not a thing. It's not a thing, Halloween. Yeah, but yeah, you return to Hungover, and yeah, it's cool that you finally get that wad of cash, and which has just been taunting you. Yeah.
Which should bring your total to what, 2310, something like that?
I don't remember. But
$2,310, and that's your total till the end of the game. Not that it matters anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's spooky, and what a relief it is to get out of there. I remember it felt like a dawn of a new day, even though it was still the dead of night, in game.
Yeah.
But just getting out to Hungover, like familiar territory where your pal Birdie is, it's safe. You're safe now. Yeah. And you're not safe because then you have to immediately go from fighting zombies and the undead to fascist teddy bears.
Yeah, there's the transition into the next chapter probably could have been done a little better because there's not really anything to direct you into its war other than the fact that like you can't really go anywhere else. But since the entrance to its war had been blocked off previously, it's not immediately clear that like, hey, you can go here now.
Yeah, I like the newsreel footage.
But that doesn't happen until after you enter
That's
the
what I'm
area.
saying. Like, it could have been after you leave hungover, then the newsreel footage plays to tip you off where to go next, rather than it playing after the fact. But I liked the newsreel conceit all the same. It was a nice
Yes.
It was a nice, shocking little jarring bit of exposition, but it really set the tone and the mood. And it's like, Chris Seaver is obviously, as we mentioned, heavily inspired by World War II in a lot of his work. So I like the vintage aspect of a lot of this, and that it's, when you're homaging and doing a parody or or even just an adaptation of a real life conflict, I think everybody can agree World War II is probably the least divisive war to celebrate as a war, because it was for a very good cause.
I mean, you'd think that, but then there was this giant controversy over Wolfenstein 2. But anyway.
Well, yeah. But I mean, the Nazis,
Yeah, it turns out Nazis don't like it when you advocate punching them. But hey, they can get punched.
Well, classically, the Nazis are great villains because they are just absolutely detestable. And sure, you can have the argument like Steven Spielberg was like, after he did Schindler's List, he was like, I can't do cartoonish Nazis anymore like I did with the Indiana Jones movies, because it's too much. It's too serious of a topic for me now, which I understand, but I think it's perfectly fine to have Nazis running around shitting themselves, whatever, fuck, they're Nazis. But the Teddies are Conker's versions of Nazis, and it's funny, for as iconic as Teddies are, like, Teddies are like the major, like, enemy tribe or clan or organization of the Conker games. They are akin to the Kremlings of Donkey Kong, but the Teddies don't appear until this point in Conker's Bad Fur Day.
And not even, they appear in this chapter, but not at this point. They don't even really show up till like halfway through this chapter.
Yeah.
They're in like half of this.
And I think it just shows like how influential the multiplayer of this game was. And then, of course, Teddies became just an overwhelming part of all follow-up Conker games that we just associate them so much with, like, being Conker's nemesis, and they work very well as the baddies.
They do work well, but because they're such a Nazi allegory, I think young Conker made the right decision to shift it from the Teddies to the Professor himself, which gives you a wider range of just having sort of a James Bond villain rather than nameless Nazi allegories.
Sure. But when you need foot soldiers, when you need just somebody to mow down, I think the Teddies work very well.
That's true. But as you say, they have this news bulletin thing go off when Conker enters the zone. You're in sort of it's not a landing zone, it's the opposite of a landing zone, a shipping out zone. Like it's a military port.
So here we see a little bit, and this is stuff that Live and Reloaded would flesh out more, but this is where we see a little bit of the military structure of the Panther Kingdom, where we've got the Squirrel High Command, the SHC, which is the main military force here, which, interesting when you look at the rest of the DKU, because we've got Brigadier Bazooka Bear over in the Northern Hemisphere. We've got Jam Jars as a drill sergeant of what? Like, the mole military? Like, who knows? But,
yeah, I don't know.
I like to think that we've got these potential allied forces here of the SHC,
You've got
Northern
the War Profiteer Hedgehog over in Tamarin.
But this is definitely the most militaristic corner of the DKU here. So you got this SHC base, and they're getting ready to ship out and have this big strike, this big D-Day strike on the Teddy's Island, which is just offshore. The Teddies have, like, basically either they've commandeered or they've been recreated on this island. That's just off the coast.
They're referred to earlier in the game, even if they don't show up till now, because the professor's been talking about how, like, he has to put up with all the Panther King shit, and he just wants to get back to his Teddy's plot, and how they're sort of his secret weapon that he's going to use to get back on top of things.
Yeah, and of course, the Teddies were around in the Milk Wars. Where they were instruments of the Weasel King, aka the Professor. So,
yeah, they first showed up, and that news bulletin's like, they've reappeared from who knows where. And it's like, well, we the player know, but
and it's never quite clear. Like, I think Big Reunion specified more that they are, like, more genetic than anything. Like, they have stuffing, but they are they are biological creatures. Whereas, here you're like, maybe they're like robotic.
I don't think it really matters in the long run.
It doesn't matter because they're teddy bears.
It's cartoon logic, yeah.
They're evil Teddy Ruxpins, but we see them cloned in Big Reunion, so I tend to veer more like they're mostly biological. There might be some mechanical cybernetic components in there to push them over the edge, but they're evil teddy bears.
They're evil teddy bears.
So
yeah, you've got to do some stuff here in the beginning, and this is My overview of this chapter is, like, it has some definite high points, it has some definite low points, and it has some points that sure do exist. And this is one of those sure do exist points.
Yeah, I feel like
it's just a series of actions you have to take before you get to the actual meat of the chapter.
When I say the night portions are my favorite, Spooky is just, I think, a wall-to-wall highlight. Like, I feel like
just
Spooky
kiss.
Is great from beginning to end. This, I'm enamored with the setting, with the atmosphere, with the tone. But I will admit, this first part of its war just it feels like padding. It's just, all right, let's just get to it.
It's such an odd area, too. Like, it's got these little spider mine things that show up later in the chapter that are never really commented on, that are just, I guess they're part of the Teddy's forces because they show up on the Teddy's side later in the fortress, but they're here for some reason. And, like, there's some of the goblins, but they're on your side. Like, specifically your military side.
Yeah, so they're the goblins/imps that I guess they are part of the Squirrel High Command, even though they're not squirrels, but that's fine.
Being used by Squirrel High Command or something.
Well, they're being used for nefarious purposes because they all have TNT barrels strapped to their back, which I love the connective through line here between Conker's Bad Fur Day and Donkey Kong Country with the TNT barrels. But they're basically, I think the implication is the Squirrel High Command, which even though they're what we view as the player and as the person controlling Conker as the heroic forces, obviously they're fighting, the basically Nazism. So yeah, we're going to view them as heroic, but the point of its war is that war makes monsters of us all, and the Squirrel High Command is certainly not innocent of sins, including that they seem to be using these goblins as suicide bombers.
Yeah.
Because they all have TNT barrels strapped to the back, and there's no other implication really to be had.
Yeah.
But here we get some more potty humor, which, I think
literal potty humor.
Yes. The imps or goblins have the runs. They have diarrhea and they're making a mess in the bathroom, which we don't see. It's all off camera, but basically, yeah. you've got to coax. Again, this is kind of a bloopy situation. You've
got to sort of push them through this obstacle field. On one side of the pathway, it's a bunch of these spider mines. On the other side of the pathway, it's some falling weights and these googly-eyed ammo boxes that will explode if you hit them. They seem a little weird, but then when you see more of the HHC personnel in Young Conker, they're all googly-eyed like filing cabinets and globes and stuff. So I guess they're just personnel.
But you have to sacrifice them, and it's fine. I mean,
this is the last point that Conker's slingshot shows up, because you have to maneuver them into the position and then go stand in the middle and slingshot them. But before you can slingshot them, you have to get the B button, the context sensitive pad to show up, which involves swimming through some loops and coaxing some electric eels to chase you through them to power up these loops. This portion was removed from Live and Reloaded. The context sensitive pad's just up. And I didn't even remember that this section was there because it's so forgettable. It wasn't difficult. It was just another thing you got to do in this area. This
whole area just really feels like they felt like they needed something before we got to the D-Day sequence. And it's just
like, it's not a bad area. It's perfectly serviceable. I like the atmosphere in this little section. It's just kind of tedious.
It's a little tedious.
There's portions of this chapter that are just kind of tedious.
Yeah. I think it does a good job of slowly setting the tone for its war, and it was almost nice to have a little bit of a cool down after Spooky, and just the heightened tension of that before the heightened tension of the beach sequence. So I think as
the beach sequence isn't even that bad. Like, it seems bad because you've got all these bullets flying and stuff, but it's like mechanically it's not actually that bad.
It's not bad, but it feels intense.
That's fair.
It feels like it's like the most challenging bit up in the game up until that point. And let's just talk about it. I mean,
because once Conker clears the debris that's blocking the way out, he goes over to Sarge and is like, "Hey, what now?" And Sarge is like, "Hey, look over there," and bricks him in the back of the head.
Right.
And Conker wakes up on the boat.
Sarge is we talked about how morally compromised the SHC is. Sarge exemplifies that, and Cameron points out that there's a little bit of Starship Troopers in his presentation, which he's basically your stock military character, but he definitely he's like so desperate to have another soldier that he basically abducts Conker against his will and throws him on the troop transport ship going to the Teddy's beach. And so it's like, really, like this you're just this desperate that you're just going to abduct this one squirrel. But okay. So Conker gets put on like, he gets knocked out. They put a helmet on him. He wakes up on the troop transport, like sailing to the beach, and from this point on, it's basically this whole sequence is a remake of the famous Normandy landing in Saving Private Ryan. Like shots lifted wholesale again.
Horrors of war. It's not being played for comedy. Conker is horrified. You, the player, are horrified. You're told to run through this beach full of machine gun fire and squirrels missing body parts and screaming for help as they die in the sand.
So we talk about, and I think of our generation, and I'm saying we're the same generation. I know you're a little younger than I am. It's
By a
fine.
year or two, it's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think our generation in particular, we were exposed to a lot of stuff via The Simpsons and like Animaniacs and like parodies of things of big pillars of pop culture before we were actually exposed to that real part of pop culture.
Oh, most
And
certainly.
But, Conker's Bad Fur Day came out when I was 17, so I was more up on pop culture by that point. But I hadn't seen Saving Private Ryan yet. I obviously knew about it. It was a big movie when it came out, and obviously I knew of it, but I hadn't seen it. So I hadn't seen this sequence until college. And I remember, like, we actually saw the D-Day sequence. It was screened for us in one of my classes. And I remember sitting there, seeing this for the first time, and I didn't realize the extent to which Bad Fur Day just, I want to say ripped it off, but, it was obviously more of a, let's just do this with squirrels. Isn't it funny?
Yeah.
But, so I was sitting there trying to stifle laughter because I just recognized it from Conker's Bad Fur Day, including the arm bit of the soldier carrying their own severed arm.
You're such a horrible person.
No, look, I'm sorry. When your first exposure to this is Conker's Bad Fur Day with squirrels, to see it, then the Tom Hanks movie, you're just like, Conker, what have you done?
Ray Day calls it Weird Al syndrome in the stream chat.
Yeah,
and that's a very apt description.
But yeah, Conker this is really where shit gets real for Conker, where, through a lot of the game up until this point, even though he's in bad situations, he greets a lot of things with a smirk and kind of like a plucky attitude, like, I'm above this, whatever.
Yeah.
Man. I'm Conker. I'm cool beans, man. And then this is where he's like, fuck, I'm in over my head. This is a goddamn nightmare. And
at the end of this extended sequence, he explicitly just kind of looks at the camera and goes, I'm not having fun anymore.
And yeah, so after this very lengthy parody of Saving Private Ryan, then you have Control on the beach, and you're just getting assaulted. Hails, bullets, like basically raining down on you like hail, and it's just unrelenting. And even like the little aesthetical touches here, like having your TV monitor get cracked by the bullets.
Yeah, like your player view camera can get shot by the bullets. These bullets don't actually track Conker. Like, he can get hurt from them if you're in the way, but they don't track him like they do later in the game.
No, but it's very disorienting. So at first you think you're getting fired at, and so that can actually cause you to just run right into the bullets. If you're calm and you actually like observe your surroundings and take your time, this sequence is not a problem. But when you're first thrown into it, I feel like I felt the same panic that Conker was supposed to be feeling here. So it was very effective, and it was
they just sort of drop you in the middle of it with no explanation.
Yeah.
And Conker gets up the beach and accompanies a living squirrel who's like, "Oh, hey, reinforcements! You made it. Where's everybody else?" And Conker's like, I'm it. Everybody else is dead." And this guy gets shot in the middle of Conker talking to him. Like, he looks back over and he's dead. Which is when Conker's like, "Oh, this isn't fun anymore. I want to go home."
It should be pointed out, too, that all the squirrels in the SHC as presented here are gray squirrels. And
because they're the ones that were required to conscript. Red squirrels are exempt from that.
But also because the logic of death in this game, and that red squirrels... is it red squirrels that can come back, or is it left vague with Greg's rules about the tails?
I think it's left vague, but like, red squirrels are definitely the the old royal family, so
And
they
and
might
all,
just
all
be
the
special.
all the squirrel tails in the game are of red squirrel tails, so it's not like you
Yeah.
see any gray squirrel tails flying around. So I think yeah, it's made even more horrific that all these gray squirrels have no shot of coming back. They just die and they're dead, and they're forced into the situation where Conker, yeah, he's basically like unlimited lives if he has enough squirrel tails, so he can just blunder through these situations. And
Hmm.
what a charmed life he leads.
Yeah, this is the point where Conker gets serious both in and out of character. He looks at you, the player, and is like, "It's time to get serious." And a little context sensitive light bulb pops up, and he gets to pull out some military guns. And puts a cigar in his mouth, and you get to enter the Teddy's fortress.
Yeah.
Um, going through this the first time, it's not too bad. You're introduced to the Teddies proper, and they're laser traps, and you kind of get to take things at your own pace and get familiar with the controls, which are way more complex than I gave them credit for, and I actually had to look it up online, all the little things you can do, and some people in one of the Discord chats I'm in were pointing out some tips to help out. Like, I didn't know you could move around while you were in first person aiming mode and
Hmm.
stuff like that. Because this was sort of before the now standard shooter control scheme was established.
Yeah.
Um, so, well, that's not necessarily true because I think like GoldenEye had the twin stick thing if you plugged in a second controller, and then Alien Trilogy and Alien Resurrection had come out on PlayStation and used twin stick, but they were horribly derided for it because that was this new control scheme that nobody was familiar with. So the reviews for those games talked about this horrible, unfamiliar control scheme for a shooter, and why would they do that? So yeah, that aged well. So there wasn't really a standard for how to do this yet. So the way it works is you can move around with the control stick, but you can also move forward and back or strafe left and right with the C buttons on the N64 controller. And then you fire with the Z trigger and can go into first person mode with the right shoulder button.
So at this
And
point,
if that sounds awkward, it's because it is.
yes, but
Um,
at this point, this game just ceases to be a 3D platformer. It's basically
yeah.
just going off and doing its own thing, and for whatever
Yeah.
reason, I don't find it that awkward. I
Yeah,
find it
no,
just
once you get the hang of what you're doing, once your brain kind of gets accustomed to it, it's pretty good. And like, I didn't have once I got used to it, it was fine. Basically, it's just because it was such a non-standard by today's gaming landscape control scheme. It took me a little bit to adjust to, but once I'd made the adjustment, it was perfectly fine.
luckily when you wall yourself off into mostly just playing DKU games, your mind can't be tainted by such things as, oh, this isn't the way they're supposed to do this. Just like, oh
Mm,
no, it's just Conquer. It's fine.
yep, it's fine. And like I said, going through this in this direction, you kind of get to do it at your own pace. You get to approach these laser traps and sort of look at them and go, okay, I can jump through this gap or crawl under this gap and whatnot. And like, yeah, teddies will hop out from around the corner, but like, they'll stand there for a minute before they actually attack you and give you some time to, oh crap, I should pull out my gun and shoot them,
Yeah,
sort of
I
thing.
found the teddies far less intimidating than the zombies.
Yeah. Well, yeah, they don't really get bad until the way back at the end of the chapter, which, yeah, fuck that section. But anyway, yeah. Um, I'm tempted to say this little section drags on a bit. Like maybe they could have cut out one of these hallways.
Yeah, I remember it going fairly long. Although I think like that's really only made clear upon replays. The first time through, when you don't know what's around the corner, I don't think it really dawned on me like, okay, this is kind of going on a bit too long, because you are in the moment and the tension is pretty high. Because you are storming this enemy base, and you've just I think that the Normandy landing parody is so effective at setting the tone and like, setting how intense this is supposed to feel. You're just kind of like glued. I remember being glued to my TV. My eyes just couldn't like break away, and I was just it was the most locked in I think I felt, like, outside of maybe a final boss fight in a video game up until that point.
It was pretty intense. To further muddy the political landscape, the latter half of these hallways features goblins with flamethrowers. So...
Yeah, I guess, they can be...
I mean, they're not HHC and they're not Teddies. I guess they just kind of work for whoever.
Or, maybe some goblins are like, my ideology aligns with the Teddies. And
this is why I would have liked to get Conker in the Goblin King scenario that was planned as the second installment for the Voidstorm adventure in Project Spark, in addition to the second episode of Big Reunion. Because it'd be like, oh, this is the political leader of all these goblins that Conker's been interacting with all these years. But no, it was not meant to be.
It would be, I think the more time passes, the more the Conker game I mourn the most that we didn't get is Getting Medieval. And I'm not saying like the goblins would have appeared in Getting Medieval, but I feel like as far as just lore goes, that would have been just that would just touch upon so much and so many aspects of Conker that I love, like Greg and the Milk Wars and maybe Batula, and that just I look at the concept art for that game and I almost pine for it now. Not to the extent of I do something like Donkey Kong Racing, but it's up there.
Yeah, but once you do get through all of these hallways and whatnot, you come out in the morgue, which has, I think, one of the most hilarious Teddy's sequences in the series.
Yeah, it's where you run up on them and they don't realize that you're there, and so they're out of character. And it's like that Sprite commercial. You remember that Sprite commercial where, like, it's like they're speaking with like these like thespian accents.
Oh, yes.
Shakespearean actors, classically trained, and it's just like out of character, like just so the real person. Yeah. They're all
two
flawed.
Teddies kind of leaning around, just like, oh yes, and then he went and did this. It's hilarious. Can you believe that, old chap? And it's like. And Conker says something, and they look over, and they're like, "Oh crap! Get into character."
Steaky, slicey.
yeah, and I like because Conker breaks the fourth wall more so than something like Banjo-Kazooie, but. Weirdly enough, like, I don't think Conker breaks the fourth wall as much as Donkey Kong Country games do. The trilogy,
Donkey Kong Country breaks the fourth wall all the time, but Conker doesn't actually do it a whole lot.
No, this is I think the most blatant example of like aside from maybe the ending where it's just like, oh, this is a video game, and the characters know they're in a video game, or they know they're actually characters, and. It just is what it is. But and then you get through the morgue, and this sets up the sequence of rescuing or saving the character of Rodent.
Yeah. At the end of the morgue bit, you've got the one squirrel in the chair, and there's two switches. One opens the door, and one sets off the electrical chair that he's strapped into. And it doesn't actually matter which one you pull. You accidentally set off the chair. But don't worry, he survives. In a pleasant surprise for this chapter.
Right. For this game.
Yeah. And then you pull the other switch and it opens the door and you get through and you are treated to yet another cutscene. This chapter has so many cutscenes. So you get another lengthy cutscene of a squirrel getting ready to face a firing squad and retreating into the armor he's wearing, turtle-like, before you regain control of Conker and get to save him. And when Conker goes up to ask him if he's all right, the squirrel's like, "Oh yeah, hey Conker, I'm fine." And Conker realizes that it's one of his pals, Rodent. You have not been introduced, Rodent, prior to this. This is not like somebody they're bringing back from earlier in the game or something. This is just somebody Conker knows who got shipped off to war, and Conker had no idea.
I could see it, if you never played Pocket Tales, you could almost go into this with the assumption that, oh yeah, Rodent must have been a character in Conker's Pocket Tales with the level of familiarity they have. But nope. Yep, this is your first introduction to Rodent. I think like Rodent was somebody who went to school with Conker, and they weren't really friends. They were acquaintances, and
yeah. Like they know each other, obviously, and they're on like okay terms. Because Conker's like, "Oh, hey, Rodent, how you doing?" After he's almost been executed by Nazis.
As you do,
as you do.
I think at this point, Conker would just be happy to see anybody he recognized. Like it just like even if he's not close with the Rodent, it's like, oh my god, like it'd be like, oh my god, I know that person. Oh, thank God.
Yeah.
But yeah, Rodent is fantastic. Rodent is one of my favorite characters.
He's so great. I think he's possibly the only like genuinely pure character in this whole game.
Rodent, and I like the aspect that Conker knew him in his younger days, because Rodent seems like he is almost an artifact of Pocket Tales or 12 Tales, Conker 64.
Yeah.
He is good. He is pure. He is adorable in his own way. And he too is in over his head.
He's great.
Yeah, but he also doesn't let it get him down. He's basically like, he remains as true to himself as he can in this situation.
Mm-hmm. And he's happy to see Conker. He's like, oh, hey, cool, a friend. Yeah, and he's wearing this experimental prototype military armor that is indestructible. So he agrees to sort of be Conker's shield as they wander through this battleground together.
Yeah.
So you're treated to some sequences where you have to kind of wander through, and the only real danger is some of those spider mines will pop up, and you have to quickly get behind Rodent so he can block the blast.
Yeah.
And eventually you make your way to a room that has a tank, where Rodent nerds out over the tank model for a bit.
Right.
I almost forgot that you have to go do this boring little sequence where you have to run through a hallway that has some spider mines in it and some acid baths and hit a switch and then run back before you can actually go control the tank. It's one of those little things you just got to do in this chapter that you forget about because it just sort of existed as some busy work to do.
I realize this is like one of the only points in the game, or one of the first points in the game that it really just gives Conker somebody to play off of.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think that's why I like Rodent so much, is because, Rare outside of Conker is all about buddy duos.
Yeah.
I don't have to do the John Lovitz impression, but Donkey and Diddy, Diddy and Dixie, Dixie and Kitty, and okay, you get the point. And Banjo-Kazooie! But Conker doesn't have that. Conker is a loner. At one point, he would have had Barry, but then it was
But even then, they weren't going through things together. You'd be playing as one or the other.
Sure. So Conker is more of a loner. So I do like this little taste of Conker being in a buddy duo with Rodent, which is why Rodent really sticks out to me as like a character. Because when I think about characters from Bad Fur Day that I like I like their character. It's not just I find them interesting But it's like, I would want to spend time with that character. It's a very short list, but Roden is on it. Weirdly, so is Birdie.
I wonder how much of that sort of character Noah would have ended up being, since he was in the 12 Tales footage we've seen. He was sort of the one who would introduce you to the area you were in and maybe give you some hints along the way.
Yeah, Noah the Owl. Yeah, I don't know.
He could be more of a Bottles, I guess. So,
but anyway,
yeah.
the sequence with Roden feels longer in my memory than it actually is.
Yeah, it's not that long. It's just slower paced because you kind of got to walk at Rodent's speed and get behind him for stuff. And then, like, the tank bit is kind of slow and methodical because you're only really in the tank for this one room where there's a big turret tower that you kind of got to go around and shoot out its legs. But you have to exit the...
But it's outside. I mean...
It's outside.
Yeah.
Game room. It's this area where there's a precarious path with all the bridges raised, and you have to get out of the tank while the turret is not facing you and go do some context-sensitive anvil dropping to lower the bridges while avoiding some teddies that spawn in the area, rise up out of the ground, and then get back in the tank and deal with them and progress to the next bit, all while shooting out the legs of this turret tower. And yeah, it's a really small, like, one-room area, but it takes a while just because you got to be methodical about it. You can't really rush it. So, yeah. And then after that, you fall into this big... I don't want to call it an arena because that's burying the lead a little bit, but it's a boss arena. You're just not having the boss fight yet.
Yeah, what is this area supposed to be? Is this cavern or?
Yeah, it's a big cavern of some sort. Like, it's obviously the boss area. We've mentioned before that a lot of these chapters are built off of on the bones of 12 Tales things, and I fully believe Its War is built off of KO's Keep or KO's Castle or whatever it was going to be called. Just because it's this big fortress and there's battlements and there's even footage of some tanks in KO's area in 12 Tales. So I think this is just a remnant of what was going to be KO's boss arena that they've dressed up as something somewhat appropriate for the chapter.
Is this appropriate? This is a weird boss.
I don't know. It's this giant... Yeah, it's... Because you fall into it from this pit you've fallen into, but then after the boss, you jump in this pit and are dumped back out, so the physics of the area are weird. It's one of those don't think about it too much things.
Right.
But before you can fight the boss, you have to go deal with these waves of submarines that are coming up around the area, and I hated this bit. Like, it wasn't hard at all. It was just really tedious. Like, so... The submarines will fire off some, like, missiles they launch up that home in on you, and you're going to get hit a lot because there's multiple submarines firing in succession, but there's also, like, chocolate right next to the context-sensitive pads, so you're never going to actually die unless you're being stubborn about it. And you just have to pull out a bazooka on these context-sensitive pads and shoot the submarines when they surface, and their hitboxes are kind of funny, and each little grouping of these you go through, there's more submarines to do. I think there's like 6 on the last one, and it just took me like half an hour. It wasn't difficult, it wasn't hard, it was just really boring. And that's just, they keep putting these sections in this chapter. I don't know why.
Yeah, it's almost like padding, but...
It didn't need it. Like, you could remove all of these bits we've talked about just kind of being there. Like, you could remove this submarine bit, you could remove that acid hallway bit, you could remove the bit with the eels, and they did. In Live and Reloaded, they kind of toned down one of the rooms earlier in the level where there's this turret that is being fired at you by this teddy that sort of runs out of bullets and needs to reload. And you've got to take out the teddy, and it then transitions to you in the turret firing at waves of teddies. And in Live and Reloaded, they just cut the first half of that room out, so you just start out being able to hop in the turret. And like, you could cut all of those sequences out, and this would still be a lengthy, meaty chapter. So I don't know why they're there.
I think they just wanted it to be even meatier and even lengthier than... I don't know, but like the strength of the areas that really work, I think, outweigh all the little padding. So
I mean, yeah, like I said, they're not bad. They're just kind of there. But yeah, once you get rid of the submarines, you can start the boss proper. And so there's this little girl in the middle of this arena.
Can I just say, as much as I love Conker, and as much as I'm apologetic for most of the things in the DKU, I have never understood what the hell the connection here is with this boss. Like, I understand it's a Teddy's experiment, okay?
Yeah.
But it gets confused when they do the Exorcist parody. Like, what does this have to do with Teddies and experiments? And there's this little girl, and there's this monstrous Teddy, and...
Yeah, I think it was purely just because of the little girl bit, to show that he's quote-unquote inhuman, to have her do the head spin thing, and the line, "Do you know what your daughter did?" Which... I've seen a lot of younger fans on the internet who've never seen The Exorcist and don't know that's a parody quote. So, like, there were Conker fandom wikis that were like, "Oh, and this is Conker's daughter, apparently." Which, I mean, to be fair, this series does then immediately introduce time travel in the next entry. So, hey, who knows?
Yeah, but I mean.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, Ray Day Pinball in chat's like, yeah, I haven't seen The Exorcist, and that line confused me. I'm like, okay, yep, see, right there.
Even if you have seen The Exorcist, I find this whole bit confusing, because I'm not sure it's made even vaguely clear what this experiment is supposed to be, and what the connection with the little girl.
It's to describe this boss, for those who haven't seen it, it's this giant... corpulent Teddy with no eyes, and one of its hands is like a big claw, and the other hand is this little poppet. And I say poppet because that's her name in supplemental material.
Poppet?
I think so? Yeah. Like, together they are the experiment, but I think the little girl specifically is Poppet.
Sounds too much like Bop It.
No, Poppet, like how the pirates refer to Elizabeth in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies.
Oh, okay. I was thinking like Bop It, that game.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she does the talking. As she describes it, she's the brains and he's the brawn. And so she'll kind of taunt you in her little girl voice, stumbling over her words as this horrifying monstrosity walks around on its robot legs and shoots missiles at you. And during this introductory sequence, Rodent finally pops out of the hole Conker fell down with the tank, and you can hop in the tank and do the boss fight. And yeah, it's this sequence where you kind of got to avoid the fire while firing back at the little girl to knock her off, and the now blind experiment will go kind of feel his way over, exposing the target on its back. And you have to kind of lather, rinse, repeat a few times because that's how boss fights go. It's not a bad boss fight. Like I've mentioned before, but the boss fights in this game are actually pretty solid, which is surprising.
Yeah.
All things considered.
The boss fights were solid in Donkey Kong 64 too, so...
That's true. Like, I don't know, this might be weak as far as boss fights go for Bad Fur Day, but, like, it's not a bad boss fight. Like, I don't think there's any bad boss fights in this game. It's just maybe one of the less interesting ones. It's pretty standard boss
Yeah.
fair, honestly.
I don't hate the actual fight. It's just the character has always just baffled me. It just I spend too long trying to figure out the logic behind the character that I can't really enjoy the boss fight itself. Also, Poppet, she is dressed very similar to Tiny Kong. She's
super is. She's wearing the little overalls with the flower on them. I was like, wait, what? What's going on?
The flower doesn't have a smiley face on Poppet, but it's still it looks so similar, and you can almost like believe that it's from the same like fashion line or whatever.
Yeah,
just like Diddy's star shirt like reappears in different contexts throughout the DKU. But yeah, it's just, and it's funny because Tiny's appearance, I think, is supposed to be modeled off of Dixie Kong's cartoon appearance. So you could even make the case this is like an evil version of Dixie Kong from the Donkey Kong Country cartoon by process of connecting the dots through inspiration.
Yeah, it's weird. It's just kind of bizarre.
Yeah.
After you defeat her, she pulls a button out of nowhere to press, which activates a self-destruct sequence, and for some more fourth wall breaking, she points to the timer that has now appeared on your HUD to go, oh, look! You've got this much time before the whole thing goes kaboom! Yeah, which brings us to my most hated part of the entire game.
Oh, Gibbon. If you played and beat both versions of Conker's Pocket Tales, having an escape sequence near the end of the game will be nothing new to you.
Oh, it's not new. I've also played through the entire Metroid sequence. Escape sequences are old hat.
Yeah.
This escape sequence in particular sucks so goddamn much.
It's intense. It's supposed to be intense.
Yeah, that's one way of putting it. So, okay, so I should clarify. The first half, this is in two halves. You go back through the lasers and Teddy ambush hallway, and then you go back across the beach. The lasers and Teddy ambush hallway was fine. Like, I died a lot, but I learned what I was doing in the process of those deaths, so I was able to make progress each time. As I learned, okay, the Teddies are going to jump out from behind this box, and this is how I get through this group of lasers, and like, by the time I got to the end of that sequence, I felt like I'd made tangible progress each death, and I'd learned and I'd progressed through. Then you get to the actual part of this I fucking hate, which is the run back down the beach. I died 37 times in a row on this before looking up how speedrunners get through this process, and glitched under one of the fences at the beginning of the area that spits you out next to the exit zone for the sequence.
You know, I can't even remember how I did it, but I know I died quite a bit. I know I remember distinctly dying and getting a little bit better with each time, but for whatever reason, the run down the beach doesn't stick in my head as much as the initial. Yeah,
because you must have blocked it out. To give the dear listeners a kind of rundown of what happens in the sequence is those machine gun turrets that were sort of firing as set dressing on the run up the beach at the beginning of this chapter now target you specifically. And there are Teddies spawning with rocket launchers, and they do not miss. And it doesn't matter if you can see them or not. They will spawn off screen and fire at you, and you will die in one hit. You do have a little radar that shows you some enemy placements. That sort of helps a little bit. You have a bazooka to shoot them with back, but you're trying to do fine aiming on an N64 controller, so, and if they fire before you do, you're shit out of luck and you will be respawning. Fortunately, respawning doesn't start you back at the beginning of the escape sequence in the boss room. It does drop you outside the door at the entrance to the beach. But, yeah, 37 times in a row.
It's not
Didn't
bad.
get
I mean,
much further than the first bend.
For challenging near end of game sequences like that, 37 times isn't bad in my opinion.
No, this sequence sucked. I made no progress on this sequence. The furthest I ever got in this sequence before I looked up how speedrunners cheated the area was just doing a mad dash to see how far I could get.
Mm-hmm.
And the teddies all have some ridiculous fucking auto aim, like aim assists bullshit going on, because they don't miss. Once they fire those bazookas, you die. Yes, as Cameron points out, Robin Beanland's score for this section is magnificent. That's the only saving grace of this entire escape sequence. Is this the score is just on point. It's great. Props to him. I still hate this bit of the game.
You sound like I do when I'm talking about Mario Kart Double Dash and the way.
Well, that's also a bad game.
The way you just get assaulted by the AI's weapons and items, and but I really like this whole escape sequence personally. Just my personal opinion.
Yeah, when was the last time you played through it?
Rare replay, maybe. All I'd say is 6 years almost, but. I like that both major Conker games, Pocket Tales and Bad Fur Day, as disparate as they are, I like that they both end with the villains being like, all right, well now I'm going to blow this shit up, and Conker has to flee and escape.
No, like, yeah, the concept of having an escape sequence here is fine. In fact, I applaud it. Yes, I like the symmetry and the sort of setting a precedent that's going on there. I just don't like it mechanically. They made it way too shit. So.
But then Conker does escape, even if you have to glitch under the fence. And then he sails back with Sarge, because Sarge has just been waiting on the transport this whole time, like an asshole. And then Conker and the Sarge. When I was younger, this was really profound. It's kind of hackneyed now, but they have this discussion about war and how horrible it is, and it's just like, oh, okay. I mean, I can get behind the sentiment, but it's there's nothing profound here. It's trite.
Yeah.
But for Conker's Bad Fur Day, it's profound.
Yeah.
And you watch the Teddy's island blow up because the self-destruct sequence, and this basically ends the war, right? Like we're left to assume eradicates the Teddies. We learn in Big Reunion, of course, that a few survived, and through various means they're kind of clawing their way back. But here, this ends the conflict. And then the conflict will continue in the future as well with, that's Live and Reloaded though. So, but then as they're discussing, they see the Teddy's island blow up. Then we see Rodent in his indestructible turtle armor being blasted through the sky. And Conker's genuinely happy to see Rodent survive, which I liked. It shows Conker has a spark. I almost said humanity, squirrelanity. I don't know what you want to call it.
Squirrelanity. I don't know.
Yeah, but Conker had Conker might feign disgust with Rodent at the end of the game and everyone else, but it shows no, he has some affection for him, and Conker's not a complete monster. So I appreciate little moments like that.
Yeah. So like I said, some high points, low points, meh points. Overall, a decent chapter.
Yeah.
They could have trimmed it up. They could have trimmed the fat a bit and refined some sections, but
I think if you can ignore the excess padding, this section is pretty great. It's not as great as Spooky, which I feel like is the high point of the game, but for me, the highs of its war completely outweigh the lows, and by and large, there's a reason why this is like one of the more memorable, beloved areas of the game.
Yeah, and I think that the fact that more multiplayer modes than not are in this setting probably helps contribute to people having this idea that its war plays a larger part in the game than it does, really.
Sure, I mean, as far as like narratives go, like I think the Teddies are the closest we come to antagonist other than the Professor and Don Weezo, and of course that's all more nebulous. The Professor is behind most everything.
Yeah, and less stuff is sort of black and white in this game, and I think the squirrels versus the Teddies is the most concrete black and white conflict that exists, even if it's confined to this one chapter. So
it's confined to this one chapter, but it spins out of the Milk Wars, and it's brought up at the beginning of the game, and it's kind of like simmering in the background. Mm-hmm. So, it pays off a lot of the stuff, even if it seems like there's a larger narrative through line in our memory.
Mm-hmm.
It's still there. It's still present. Mm-hmm. It's just a lot more abstract and scattershot.
Yeah, and I think like Live and Reloaded and subsequent things sort of helped cement the imagery in people's minds when thinking about Conker.
So you return to Windy, and the windmill is destroyed.
Yeah. There's bits of it lying around. The Queen Bee has been crushed by some of the wreckage.
Callously discarding this character.
Yep. You make your way up the hill and find Rodent, who gives you a nice, touching, "it's been an honor to serve with you" thing, and maybe goes on a bit long for Conker's tastes. And Conker's kind of surprised that the windmill isn't going to be the final level of the game. He thought for sure that it was going to be the final world. You do get to go down some of its innards, and you get spit out on the far side of a ravine you couldn't get across earlier in the game, next to Don Weezo, who thought he told you to get out of town. But never mind that. He's got a job for you.
Right. The whole setup for this always feels just kind of tacked on. Like, wait, okay, what? Like, and granted, like Don Weezo, like he has set up, prior to this, like in the casino, or not casino, but in the nightclub. Mm-hmm. But he's just like, Don Weezo says, "Oh yeah, let's wrap up this bit and let's get to the ending."
And he's like, so remember when I had you blow up the Ugas? Yeah, that was bad for business. The volcano thing kind of put me out of business. So we're gonna go rob the bank now. And Barry's like, "Oh, hi, Conker." She's done being passive aggressive at Conker, and Don Weasel's like, "Wait, I thought you said you didn't know this guy." And Barry's like, no, it's my boyfriend. I was mad at him earlier.
Right.
This couple.
It's just basically, they're like, it's almost like they realize, like, oh, we've got to wrap everything up, and we have no idea how to do it, so let's just
lampshade everything.
Yeah,
and she walks out in this black leather Trinity in the Matrix outfit, and it's complaining about how tight it is and there's no pockets, and Conker's like, "Okay, yeah, I'll help you rob this bank, but I want an outfit that cool." And Don Weasel's like, "Oh yeah, sure, deal." So what proceeds is a shot-for-shot remake of the scene where Neo and Trinity walk into the bank area and do the bag full of guns through the metal detector thing, shoot up the place. It's ridiculous. In the design notes, this was the bits we get to play through were going to be the back half of the chapter, and there was going to be this sort of Metal Gear Solid-esque stealth section leading up to this. Which I think could have been interesting, because as it is, this chapter is 2 rooms long.
Yeah, this is barely this is more like an epilogue, an extended epilogue to the game.
And the 2 rooms are pretty disconnected. And yeah, you go through this admittedly pretty fucking cool Matrix parody sequence.
Well, I should also point out, too, because I'm going to bring up Big Reunion again, because you mentioned Metal Gear Solid, and they do eventually do a Metal Gear Solid parody in Big Reunion with the whole stealth sequence. You're infiltrating the Teddy's new base, and Birdie is communicating with you on comms, and it's just, so they eventually do get there, but not in this game.
And this is an intense shooting section, but the way it's presented is a nice sort of relaxing breather after the intensity of its war.
Oh yeah.
Because you get to do the whole thing in sort of Matrix slow-mo. And as a note, this is the only section of the game with actual weasel enemies that you fight. So,
yeah,
because all of the bank security are weasels.
We talk a lot about the moral implications of what Conker does throughout. Like, oh, okay, he's murdering villagers. Well, he's under bachelor's thrall, so it's okay. Sacrificing Bloopy, not okay. This I would put towards not okay, because I know like weasels are kind of portrayed as antagonists, but these are just bank guards of the Federal Reserve Bank. Like there's no antagonism here that warrants their murder, because weasels along with goblins are one of those, like, these can be bad guys, good guys, side guys. They're just kind of a race that exists in this area. So yeah, and it's just like, wow, Conker and Barry. I know this is a Matrix parody, right? Like, I'm not dense.
Yeah.
I know, like, obviously in the movie, this is what Neo and Trinity do. But when you just paste Conker and Barry over it and have a very like loose concept to justify it, I don't think it works, again, because Conker and Barry are just committing cold-blooded murder for money to help a gangster. Like,
that's true. It is cool that, like, you're finally doing the Conker and Barry in Conker's Bad Fur Day thing.
Yeah.
Like, she's there, she's being AI controlled, but she's helping you out with stuff, and she helps out in the cutscenes that kind of puncture these sequences as you context-sensitive sort of Matrix dodge between pillars in the bank to slow-mo mow down these guards. And it's a lot of cool set pieces. The moral implications aren't great. It looks neat, though.
Oh, it looks neat, and it was fun to play, so My complaints about it are more retroactive than they were contemporary.
Yeah. And then, like, you go through the big vault door, and there's just a million laser traps, and Barry deactivates all of them. Barry comes off as just kind of, I don't want to say suspiciously competent, but, like, she knows what she's doing in this chapter. And it just sort of is a thing in Bad Fur Day with no comment. I think viewed through the lens of later entries in the series, where it's now retroactively established that Barry and Conker used to be agents for the SHC prior to Bad Fur Day. Barry's skills are just kind of, oh yeah, she must have picked that up while she was working for the government, doing spy missions. Like, these two used to be James Bond types, so this is just sort of old hat.
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people are like, we're going to be antagonistic towards young Conker no matter what, but you see young Conker,
and I'll continue to ignore those people.
They get into the bank vault. There's this sequence where it shows Conker getting $1 million, like that.
Yeah,
he's just grabbing all the cash.
Yeah, lots of little googly-eyed Feiho bundles bouncing around, and you get to go frying pan them and start picking them up. And after 3, it sort of fades to black and then fades back in after some extended period of time where Conker has finished grabbing all of them, and it shows his. He points to the money total UI element, is like, "Oh man, I got $1 million," and Barry's just kind of scoffing at his materialism, and he's like, "Oh, you're one to talk, whatever."
Right, they're both terrible people. So then it just launches like.
Yeah, like Barry points behind him, and the Panther King is sitting in a parody of the Emperor's throne from Star Wars, and has apparently been there the whole time. I don't know. It's just like, it's time for the final boss. We have to do this now.
Yeah, so the bank vault's gonna launch into space.
Not yet. It's later on in this convoluted sequence.
Okay, I can't remember the exact order, but I think it's because the throne room is a direct like copy of Palpatine's from the second Death Star. So I'm just like, okay, they're in space now.
Yeah, this isn't even like the Panther King's throne room. The throne is there. It's been transported here to this area, and the Panther King's like, "Oh, hey, this is the Red Squirrel finally." And Don Weezo steps out, and he's like, "Yep, I got him here, just like you wanted," and he gets paid off. And the Panther King's like, "Oh, we don't need the girl," and Barry gets mowed down by Don Weezo at this point, and just dies, gurgling blood, saying Conker's name on the floor as she bleeds out.
It's a horrific death, by the way.
It's a super horrific death.
I think it's the sound design here with the gurgling that really just makes it unpleasant. And I'm not saying that like, oh, this is problematic. I'm saying like they did a really good job of selling this death.
Yeah. And Conker's just like, at first Conker's like, "Hey, you missed me, asshole," and then he looks over and sees Barry just fucking bullet ridden on the floor and is horrified.
Yeah, things get very real for Conker very quickly here.
And yeah, this is kind of where the professor enters the room, because the Panther King starts like coughing a bit. And the professor, for how big the professor is built up, and the rivalry between Conker and the professor is established in later games, and they are built as like retroactively now. They're these old rivals. This is the only bit of the game where they're in the same room. They don't actually really talk to each other. The professor's more talking like to himself / the audience, and just makes some asides to Conker occasionally. Like, "Oh man, I had to resort to my backup plan because somebody destroyed all my teddies, asshole." Sort of thing. Which, yeah, like, with the added context of later games, you can kind of read that as comfortable familiarity rather than, you know. But he's spiked the milk with something, and a adult xenomorph bursts out of the Panther King's chest, and the Panther King dies. There's no fight with the Panther King. This is where
general scaled.
Yeah, this is where the professor goes, "Oh, and fuck this planet. I'm gonna live in a world with technology, god damn it," and makes the room you're in blast off into space.
Bank vault, right. So, just so we can clarify the chain of machinations here, Don Weezo was setting up this bank robbery in order to get Conker into the Panther King's grasp, because Don Weezo, like the Panther King and the whole government of the Panther Kingdom, they're mobbed up, right? So
yeah,
Don Weezo, this was a trap for Conker, and then meanwhile, the professor is planning on finally killing the Panther King with his genetic xenomorph recreation, whatever. He maybe saw Aliens one night and he was like, "That's what I need right there. Let me get to work on the lab recreating that." And he put a xenomorph embryo in the milk. I don't know, but
I don't know.
Yeah, so this is the point where this thing has been gestating in the Panther King all this time, and it finally burst out of him, and they just all happen to be in the bank vault because I guess the professor wanted to see it happen to the Panther King, and Don Weezo was there because he was trying to help the Panther King, and then Don Weezo was like, "Oh, bye! Like I'm getting out of here."
I kind of feel like the table leg thing was the professor kind of getting at Conker specifically while keeping the Panther King occupied, and this xenomorph thing was like a backup plan that just happened to come to fruition now while everyone was gathered, rather than specifically timed to happen at this point.
Again, there's nothing in Bad Fur Day or in this material that would hint that the professor was trying to get to Conker specifically.
Okay, yeah, that's retroactive continuity.
Yes.
So.
Yes, and sure, that's fine. Like I'm all about embracing young Conker canon here, but in Bad Fur Day itself, we wouldn't know that they have any connection.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, the table leg thing would probably just be to keep the Panther King, either to keep the Panther King distracted or just something else he has to deal with by putting up for this shit. So the bank vault apparently has some sort of security protocol that the professor exploits that shoots it into space as you want. It's like, oh yeah, Fort Knox. Yeah, well, we better have a backup plan in case anybody breaches it. Let's shoot it into space. And Conker goes and flips a switch, which opens up a side door, which results in continuing the alien parody of him getting into some power loader armor.
Yeah.
And saying, one of the few times Conker curses in the game, saying, "Get away from her, you bitch," as he comes out in the armor and sees Heinrich, the alien, drooling over Barry's dead body. And he opens up the airlock, blasting the Panther King's corpse out, and the professor out, while he screams about, "Oh, God! Why didn't I put any anchors on this chair? Whose bloody idea was it to go into this? Oh, shit, it was mine! Shit! Fuck! Ah!" And Barry's body flies out the airlock as well before Conker can grab her. And you're left to have the final boss fight with Heinrich the alien, where you have to sort of do a little punch-out sequence with him and hit him with the power loader in between attacks to stun him, and then grab his tail and do a Bowser toss on him.
Yep. Super Mario 64. I like how this brings the N64 first full circle almost.
Yeah.
Spinning a baddie by the tail.
This can be frustrating for first-time players if they don't quite have the hang of the mechanics here. Because it is totally possible to spin the stick too quickly and just get no traction during this boss fight. You have to kind of go at a rhythm with it and build up momentum and make sure to throw at the correct time. It does a lot to assist you behind the scenes. There's a little cutscene when you're picking up Heinrich by the tail that'll which disguises the fact that they reposition you to a more favorable spot to throw him from. And while it's easy to mess up the throw, it's also easy to get the throw right because there's such a large window for the strike zone for this thing. So yeah, it shouldn't take you too many tries to get this, but once you've thrown him through the airlock 3 times in a row, because every single boss fight in this game does things in sets of 3. He claws his way back in. Conker is amazed because this defies boss fight logic. And the game freezes in the middle of the animation of Heinrich getting ready to kill him.
Yep, and then Conker processes what's happening.
Yeah.
And he climbs out of the power loader suit.
Yeah, talk about fourth wall breaking.
Yeah. So, and then he's like, well, what do I do? And then so he goes to talk to the programmer, and then has this completely like meta discussion with a behind the scenes figure, purportedly like somebody on the team, and then they communicate via text.
Little command prompts.
Yeah.
And Conker's like, hey, why don't you help me out with this situation, and I won't tell anyone that you shipped the game in this state. And the programmer's like, okay, deal. So Conker gets like a Matrix-style weapon locker loadout.
Yeah, it's weird that we come back to the Matrix parody at this point, because we had the Enter the Vertex, and then it shifts into a Star Wars / Alien parody, and then we go back to the Matrix to wrap it up.
And he picks out a cool-looking katana and asks the programmer to put them in the throne room and undo the freeze, and he cuts Heinrich's head off. At which point, some people start filtering in and going, oh, hey, Conker's here, and the Panther King's dead. Oh, man. I think Conker should be the next king. And Conker's like, wait, what? No, I just want to go home with Barry. Oh, shit! I should have asked the programmer to revive Barry!
In what reality does it make sense for all of these random nobodies to storm the like seat of government? Oh, I hear myself now.
Fuck.
But yeah, they're just strolling in there like, oh, what's happening in here? it becomes very like sitcom-y in structure. Like
Conker's having an existential crisis because he realized he could have just brought Barry back, but he was too caught up in the moment of the boss fight and didn't ask about it. And everybody else is like, oh, hey, the king is dead. Guess you're the new king. And just kind of install him on the throne against his wishes while he's processing that, hey, Barry's really dead and I fucked up on bringing her back when I could have.
And oh my god, I'm kind of a monster. What have I become? In this shallow pursuit of money and material comforts, I've lost what was really important. And it's kind of like a little bit of Conker mentally like reconnecting with who he was, like pre-Bad Fur Day almost. Like this is why when I say Pocket Tales, it for me is this essential component to make Bad Fur Day work. This is what I'm talking about, because I feel like this little moment would not work had we not known Conker and Barry before. Had we not seen them when they weren't just the worst.
It kind of brings us full circle. We're back to the opening scene with Conker in the throne room, and he's talking to the audience again at this point. He's like, well, now you know how all these assholes are. And I kind of hate it here. I just want to go home with Barry, maybe have a beer, and that's never going to happen. And the credits roll.
Yeah, and then the credits roll, and very somber credits. Yeah. And I remember thinking just how funny it was at the time. Because, at the time, I super cynical, and just that was just right up my alley. Like, just the most dark, depressing ending you could think of. Not the most depressing ending, though, they had planned, but...
Yeah.
I just thought, like, oh my god, that is brilliant that it just ended on this note of utter despair. The end. Bye. Like, that, as the very, like, emo, depressed teenager I was, yeah, that was right up my alley. And I still like the ending, too, because it is a bit of instant karmic comeuppance for Conker. There are consequences for their actions. There is a moral arc for this universe. So it makes a lot of the game work ultimately.
Yeah, there's one final scene after the credits where he's back in the Cock and Plucker, ordering a drink. Tells the bartender to just leave the bottle.
Yep.
and eventually wanders out into the rain and stumbles off in the other direction this time.
Yeah,
And that's where it fades
potentially
out.
sets up a sequel, where here we go again. But at one point in time, they had planned to have the ending be Conker killing himself.
Yeah, I'm glad they didn't go that route.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think ultimately cooler heads would have had to prevail, and it's like, no, we can't just like close the book on Conker. If this game is successful, we will want to reuse the character and get him into new situations. And while the game wasn't quote unquote successful, it was notable enough that, of course, Conker is a iconic character now.
Yeah, definitely.
And
that's the game.
I mean that's the game. That is one bad day, if I may say so. But I don't know. We'll save our final thoughts for the end of the episode. I did want to touch upon real quick multiplayer, and I don't have a lot to say about multiplayer, but I feel like it would be doing a disservice to Conker's Bad Fur Day not to discuss it, because so much of what came after Bad Fur Day came from this multiplayer. And it had a really good multiplayer mode. Yeah. Very, too.
Again, ahead of its time with really nice enemy or multiplayer bot AI. Which wasn't really a thing before this time.
Yeah, it was fun to play by yourself. And, before, like, in a multiplayer, if I wanted to experience it by myself, it would basically be plugging in, 3 other controllers and just setting it up where I'm just shooting motionless characters or whatever. Boring, but here you actually, you could create a little challenge for yourself. And it was
there were
fun.
Bot settings with multiple AI levels and how many bots you wanted to be facing off against. And it works pretty well. There's 7 different modes you can go through. And I think about half of them are based on its war. And the other half are just sort of a potpourri of other things in the game.
Yeah.
There's the one entitled War, which is just straight up squirrels versus teddies, and it's a bit of a capture the flag, where you can go. Oh, I think I've actually forgotten one on this list. And it's another one because there is a capture the flag mode called Colors, I think. But yeah, there's a grab the canister and bring it back to a point, and the area outside of the safe zones will be flooded with deadly gas, killing anyone who's still out on the field. There's a capture the flag one, which is again squirrels versus teddies. There's tank, which is another canister and gas one, but you're in tanks this time. And these are all pretty standard, like Call of Duty type multiplayer fare.
Yeah.
Beach is the other explicitly it's war-based one, and I find this one a lot more interesting because one side is playing as the quote-unquote Frenchies, which are the sort of chipmunk villagers from the spooky chapter, and you are sort of making your way up a beach to the exit tunnels that have some vehicles that will funnel you away from the fighting and allow you to escape. And the other side is playing as the teddies in turrets, trying to gun them down and recapture them.
Yep, a beach was my favorite. Beach was the one I played the most.
Yeah, there's tons of different paths you can follow and little power-ups you can grab to make you run faster. Or there's like the plunger you can thing to sort of temporarily blow up the teddy area. There's just a lot of fun options for the villagers. and the Teddies get to play a sort of tower defense type thing on their half. The sort of mismatched sides, I think, was a bit ahead of its time, because it was before stuff like Left 4 Dead or Evolve, and so on would make that sort of genre popular, where the two sides were not mirrors of each other. But yeah, Beach is just an early example of that the strength of that sort of thing. And yeah, I had a lot of fun with that, playing around with that this week as I was going through these. The other mismatched sides mode, which is a lot closer to Evolve or some of the Left 4 Dead multiplayer, would be Raptor, where one side is playing as some Ugas who are hungry and want some eggs, which they will attempt to steal from the raptor nest on the other side of the temple and bring back to their giant frying pan to make an omelet. And the other side is playing as a raptor who needs to bring back some Ugas to feed the young hatchling. And this can be like up to 4 Ugas versus 1 raptor. And it's a bit Monster Hunter, it's a bit Evolve. There's power-ups for the Ugas scattered around, like different weapons, some bombs, health refills, and whatnot. And like if you've got some good team coordination or some good AI setup, you can have some nice team fight versus the giant dinosaur. But if the dinosaur gets its jaws on you, you're dead. So like, yeah. The difficulty is very much like, if your Uga's side is set up properly, you can do really well, or if you're playing as the raptor, you can do really well. And it's that mismatched side things, and it's also really fun.
Although I found that I never wanted to not play as the raptor.
I found playing as the raptor like fun the first couple times, but then it just got kind of boring because I won way too easily if I didn't have
right, yeah. But I mean,
AI
the allure of being a dinosaur,
that's fair, yeah,
too strong.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like with Beach, I found it fun playing as the Frenchies quite a bit, but you give me the option to be a dinosaur that can tear apart these cavemen. Yeah, I'm gonna be the dinosaur.
Yeah. And then the other, there's a deathmatch mode, which is just deathmatch. You can play as like a number of these different races, and it's just sort of a free-for-all, and you all go around killing each other. But the other themed mode is Heist, where you play as some weasels robbing the bank. And this is actually, I think, my favorite of the multiplayer modes because it's just super fun.
I thought the lava board race would be your favorite.
No, I was just going to not talk about that and hope you didn't mention it. There is a multiplayer race that is the lava boarding bit from earlier in the game, but it's an actual race this time instead of a kill all the other Ugas. Although you do still have your frying pan, although you can turn on a cheat to turn it into a bat. Early appearance of the bat to whack your opponents with. Yeah, not much to say about race. Heist, yeah, I think is my favorite, just because it's the only mode where you can play as weasels. Oh, well, aside from deathmatch, I guess. But it's the only mode themed around the weasels.
Yeah.
And they're just fun. You get a nice briefing from Don Weezo. You get to run around as these little Roger Rabbit, Wind in the Willows dudes and double cross each other while you try to run off with the money. So, yeah, they're fun modes.
They are. You can definitely see why Chris Seaver and crew were like very tantalized with expanding and making the multiplayer more of a focus, as they would do with Live and Reloaded and plan to do with Getting Medieval.
Yeah.
But I know as a fandom there was some complaints about it at the time, where it's like, no, we want more of a single player experience. We want an actual sequel to Conker's Bad Fur Day. We don't just want these nebulous like multiplayer prequels and sequels set in the far future. And Like, and then the far, far past, we want, you know, Conker's story to continue. But you can see where, like, they got excited by the idea.
And these are definitely sort of the prototype of the later Chapter X stuff in Live and Reloaded, because each of these, well, maybe not each of these, the majority of these start out with a unique cutscene sort of giving you a rundown of the story behind this scenario and what your side needs to do in it. And then a lot of them in turn have a unique victory or loss little video for your side. Like for Beach, if you're playing as the Teddies, you get a little briefing about like, hey, you need to gun down these villagers and recapture them. And there's a little like victory scene of the Frenchies behind barbed wire cages while the Teddies Nazi goose step around. But if you're playing as the Frenchies, you get like Sarge giving them a pep talk as the boat brings them to the beach, saying like, hey, you're almost home free. You just need to get past this one little bit and get to the trucks, and they'll take you away, and you'll be free of all this war. And the victory thing is a little like them congregating in front of like a France 2 miles sign and having a little, yay, we made it sort of thing.
France 2 miles.
Yeah. So like they're just sort of like fun little fluff. They're not like the actual like story beats that is being told over the course of Chapter X in Live and Reloaded. But you can definitely see how Chapter X sort of evolved out of this setup.
Mm-hmm. For sure. All right, we have calls to take, Gibbon.
Oh, God. We have so many calls to take.
We have so many calls to take. A lot of people wanted to get in their calls before we wrapped up the Spotlight series. So we have something like 9 calls. Some of them are the same callers who just hit the cutoff point and had more to say. So let's take the first call, which is just one call from an old friend of ours.
Okay.
Hey guys, it's your friend Dustin. Remember me? Here to talk about Conker's Bad Fur Day. I love me some Conker's Bad Fur Day. So my story of Conker is, it's not that different from a lot of people. I was a kid when it came out. Well, I think I just entered my teenage years, or was bordering on it. I think I was 12 at the time. But, you know, parents would take me down, rent it from Blockbuster, eventually got it for my birthday at Toys R Us at an age much too young to be playing M-rated games. But one interesting thing about Conker's Bad Fur Day is it's what directly led me to DK Vine. Way back in the day, I had heard about Conker's... I forget where I first heard about Conker's Bad Fur Day. But it had popped into my mind. I knew it was the character from Diddy Kong Racing. So I went to look up information about it on the internet, this brand new invention, which eventually led me to DK Vine, where you guys were talking about it. So that's what brought me to the site. That's what made me join the forum. That's what led me to find most of my friends that I'm still friends with to this day. So Conker's Bad Fur Day kind of shaped me into where my life is right now. Isn't that a weird thing to say? Yeah, I still love Conker's Bad Fur Day to this day. Not all of it holds up 100% the best, but overall, I still really like it and the direction it's taken me in my life. All right, have a good rest of the show. Stay frosty.
Is that Dustin's catchphrase?
I guess it is now.
Okay, well, I will keep frosted. Thanks, Dustin. Dustin Jackson, our friend. Also, by the way, the one responsible for the season 9 episode artwork, the album artwork that you can see on Kongversation.com or on iTunes, various podcast networks. I think Bad Fur Day led a few people to DK Vine over the years, because this game came out, we launched in 99, August 99, jump ahead of Donkey Kong 64's release, and we're there for Banjo-Tooie's release, and then Conker's Bad Fur Day was like the third big game we covered.
Yeah.
And a lot of people found us through that and through the connections that Nintendo was definitely trying to downplay during this time via Diddy Kong Racing. So we're glad to have you, Dustin. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. The next one is a 2-part call, so we're going to play them back to back.
Hello, this is Hammerheart. I'm calling about the Conversation episode about Conker's Bad Fur Day. Yes, sorry. This is the first time I've ever done this. First of all, I'm surprised that the DK Vine is even still around at this point. I mean, like, I used to visit the website back 20 years ago, when I was a young lad, I stopped visiting it after a while, and I'm surprised that the place is still even around, and that's really an achievement. So I really have to congratulate you guys for sticking around. Anyway, I want to talk about this little ginger bastard, Conker. Conker, for me, I was the same age as Hyle. I was turning 17, and Conker for me was really a turning point. It was the point where, I grew up as a child of the 80s and the 90s. I grew up during that era and, playing games that were marketed towards children. I mean, stuff like, Mario, Donkey Kong, Sonic, Banjo-Kazooie, etc. And Conker was really the turning point for it. I mean, I had played M-rated games before, but nothing quite like Conker. It doesn't, at first appearance, it doesn't look like an M-rated game, but, finally when you do sit down and play it, you realize, this isn't traditional, kids fare, rated E for everyone type stuff. And, I was 17, and, Hyle was 17 also at the time, like you said on the, conversation. And when you're at that age to where, you want to do more quote unquote adult stuff. I mean, you're like, I'm not a kid anymore, I'm on the cusp of young adulthood, I want to do something more quote unquote adult. And, for me, Conker was kind of that. Also, it's what got me back into the N64. Originally, it was 2001, and I was all about the Sega Dreamcast at that time, and, I hear about this game Conker, and I'm like, for the N64, that old thing? That thing's, on the way out. But, it's the game that convinced me to, dust off my N64 and actually begin to play it again. And it was really, it's a memory that's really stuck with me. It was a turning point for me. It was where Conker kind of represents, the game is really a symbol of innocence lost. And like how, hello, this is Hammerheart again. I just wanted to finish talking about something. I got cut off there. Also, I wanted to ask you guys, okay, you say that some of the humor in Conker's Bad Fur Day doesn't hold up. Personally, I think it still does. I wouldn't change anything at all about it. That's the thing with comedy nowadays. I think comedy is a dead genre because nowadays nobody can make fun of anyone. I have no regrets about the humor of the early 2000s, because back then, I mean, not only did we punch down, we punched up, we punched left, we punched right, we punched sideways. I mean, everything was on the chopping block, and I think Conker still holds up. The humor still holds up for me. It's like one of those old Mel Brooks comedies, like Blazing Saddles, or if you've seen this Kung Pao Into the Fist, it still holds up. So, I mean, in your opinion, what doesn't hold up about it? Also, I want to thank you for allowing me to speak to you.
Well, thank you for the call, Hammerheart. And
Yeah.
so you mentioned that Conker very much represents innocence lost, especially for us who were like right on the cusp of adulthood when it came out. Like both of us were 17, so it is funny how so much of the DKU specifically mirrored my own childhood into adulthood. I see Diddy Kong is the character I identify with the most because I feel like Diddy Kong kind of grew up alongside me. And then Conker also like represented the passage from, when I can start playing M-rated games and all the ugliness of adulthood starts creeping into your life. Like having to pay taxes and just all of the bullshit that comes with bullshit responsibility, only here manifested in poo monsters and whatnot. But yeah, it's curious how it all kind of synced up so well in those first 7 to 8 years of the DKU. So it's a unique experience to have, as opposed to somebody like Dustin who sneaked the game when they were 12. So but to your other point, Hammerheart, about like what doesn't hold up, not a lot of Conker doesn't hold up. A lot of the jokes still work today. We mentioned on the last episode, it was basically stuff like the implied rape in the COG scenes just doesn't work in today's context.
Not necessarily the implied rape, but the implied rape as a punchline. Like,
yes,
that's
right.
That's
like,
not something. And it's. I don't want to be dismissive while discussing this. Like, it's just, I think society has sort of moved on a bit since then and realizes that that's not something that should be joked about.
Like, obviously, comedy is sort of my professional background, if you want to call it that, aside from Donkey Kong journalism, right? So I've kind of seen and evolved myself when it comes to comedy in the last 20 years, but, specifically the last 10 years. And, I think while comedy is subjective, like musical taste, right? I feel like comedy also kind of mirrors the societal arc that we find ourselves in, and comedy is oftentimes a response, just like zombie movies were a response to what was going on at the time. I feel like comedy kind of mirrors and is an antidote to what's ailing us, and I feel like right now we don't need the nihilistic cynicism so much of the comedy of that era. We need kind of something more along the lines of what Rodent embodies, this kind of purity and optimism and like super sincere form of comedy, in my opinion, at least. And I feel like, you don't really want to like punch down anymore. You want to have more conscientious comedy that's more, I think, careful to be accepting of all people. And, it's not that you can't be taboo breaking. You can't like push boundaries, but I don't think it's a bad thing that we're more thoughtful with how we do that. And it's something that, I've obviously struggled with. It's something that I've evolved on. Not just with DK Vine, but with this very podcast, the humor that we engaged with early on, which I've discussed. Every time you're on, Gibbon, we seem to discuss it. But, I think Bad Fur Day is kind of born out of that early South Park era. And even South Park, you look at South Park and how that's evolved. And, I I actually have to, I'm not a South Park fan, but I have to commend them how, they've kind of taken something that came from this era and they've kind of allowed it to grow over time and, maybe be a little bit more thoughtful. And I don't know, like, I understand where the comedy was of that era, where like we need to like break all the boundaries and push all the buttons we can, and we're kind of like rebelling against the set standards of like the morality police. And now it's kind of from a different perspective. We're like, well, maybe that vantage point is a vantage point of privilege where like, oh, we can think, and I'm not accusing the Conker team of this, by the way. Like, this was just where comedy was at the time, but it's just like, for me, like, I view some of the comedy, it was like, well, I don't mean any harm by it. We're making fun of this. Yeah, but that's a very privileged thing for me to say as a white cisgendered male, right? Like, so.
Yeah, like the other thing in that chapter, aside from the sort of rape as a punchline, is the gay jokes. And like,
right.
You can make jokes involving homosexuality. What's not okay with the jokes in this chapter are the fact that the homosexuality is the punchline of the joke.
Yeah.
Like, and that's that punching down aspect that Hyle was talking about. Like, that's the part that doesn't hold up.
Yeah, and I think like the comedy is of the era it finds itself in. So Blazing Saddles was like a perfect commentary in the 70s. Couldn't make it today, but that wouldn't work for today. And that's not to dismiss Mel Brooks or Blazing Saddles, which I love, but
great movie.
Yeah, right, exactly, yeah. And so I think as society evolves and grows, comedy grows and evolves, and the challenge is growing and evolving with it. And I think that's where I would really be excited to see a new Conker game, right? Because I feel like you wouldn't have the few jokes that don't really hold up today, and you could do something exciting with it that's still kind of pushing the same buttons, but doing it in just a slightly more thoughtful way, which,
yeah,
that's just my opinion on it. But
I think
you for the call.
It's a well-informed opinion, I think. So yeah, thank you for the call.
It comes from my own very, very painful evolution. So, but thank you for the call. All right, let's take the next one. Is this a one-part or a two-part? It's a one-part.
Ahoy there, DK Vine crew. Captain Logan here. Just wanted to share my thoughts and my feelings on Conker's Bad Fur Day. I grew up a boy of 82 back in the day thinking Conker's Bad Fur Day can't be real. Nintendo can't be putting a mature rated game on the N64. Sure enough, they did. In college, I had an amazing time playing multiplayer with my roommates. I had 3 other roommates at the time. We were all in art school. We had an amazing time storming the beaches, running around with katanas, playing teddy bears with sniper rifles and saying, snipes, snipes. And this is one of those games that really kind of set me down the Nintendo path. I've been playing Nintendo games my entire life, and getting into adulthood, I felt like I was being left behind and envious of those playing on PlayStation and Dreamcast and thinking, when is Nintendo going to actually service me? And service me they did, but in the form of Conker's Bad Fur Day. I love this game. It's a tribute to just what Rare can do when they put their minds to it, and sticking with an idea and changing it and being willing to upheave anything that they want to do in the past for what they think is going to be a good game. Doing this as I drive home. Be safe. Wear a mask. I love you all. Arr.
Thanks, Captain Logan. That was Captain Logan, by the way, of the Keelhold podcast. Prominent member of the Sea of Thieves community. And actually, they have a Skelly in Sea of Thieves, a skeleton captain.
Oh, man. I'm jealous.
One of the few fans who actually have a skeleton captain named after them. So,
dang.
Yeah. So, yeah. it's funny that you say that, like, oh, Nintendo's finally stepping up their game. with Conker when they basically, like, I don't want to say they pushed it to the side, because I feel like it's a misnomer to say, like, Nintendo tried to bury Conker, because they didn't.
Yeah, they didn't. They did some promotion. They didn't ignore it. But
they also, I don't think, knew what to do with it, really.
Yeah. Which is kind of funny now that we got some interviews about Star Fox Adventures the other day that revealed that, like, the crystal design change was, like, Miyamoto's idea, because he'd watched a movie with, like, a sexy lead and was like, oh, we need some of that in there. And, like, later things like Nintendo now being the publishers of Bayonetta and doing a Playboy promotion and stuff like that, to sort of look back at them kind of looking at Bad Fur Day and going, what do we do with this? And it's like, maybe if it had come a few years later, they would have just gone, fuck it, let's go all in.
I feel like, it was a little too early. Just like Nuts and Bolts was a little too early for the zeitgeist, or at least for, in this case, not the zeitgeist, because I think Conker's Bad Fur Day was right in the middle of the zeitgeist there, but it was a little bit too early for Nintendo's changing philosophies. And by that point, Rare was already owned by Microsoft, so you didn't really have that evolution from Conker's Bad Fur Day into, Nintendo growing into a more nuanced company when it came to pleasing all ages.
Yep. Ah, well, what can you do?
Yep. All right, the next call is a two-parter.
Have I got the right number here? I think I do. Hello, Kongversation. Who we got here? Hyle, and I am Gibbon. Shooting IM stands for Incredible Monkey. Anyway, calling about Conker's Bad Fur Day. So anyway, I was one of these kids who was looking forward to 12 Tales, and, well, everything Rare had done through this era had been amazing up until then, so I thought this would be great too. And when it became Bad Fur Day, due to the content, I wasn't allowed to get it. So I didn't end up even playing it until 2015 or so, when Rare Replay came out. So I'd heard the game was pretty hyped up and gave it a play, and it just didn't have any magic to me. Like, it didn't live up to the standard of all the other games, Banjo-Kazooie, Tooie, DK64, just wasn't up to the standard, I thought. I don't know if time had just not let it have its magic like it would have in 2001, but just didn't do it for me. Like, I didn't even finish the game, which is surprising. I reckon I'll get back to it at one point. What else? The humor in the game, it just didn't seem funny to me. I thought what Banjo-Tooie did, just pushing the boundaries of what you could keep in the game while keeping it G-rated, that was way funnier to me than just the out-and-out sort of South Park-style humor. And what other things do I want to say? This was probably discussed back in the day, but did Conker cause Nintendo to not buy Rare? This might have already been discussed. But, were they so upset with the content that they didn't go ahead and buy Rare? Thought that might be a good conversation starter. Anyway, that's it for now. See ya. Hey, Conversation, it's me again. And I forgot to even say who it was. Yeah, that was DJ Cat calling in the previous call. Anyway, I think I missed some points from my last call. I didn't sort of clarify about the humor all that well. I heard you talking about it in the first part, how it there was good reason why they changed from 12 Tales to what they did with Bad Fur Day. Things that are understandable now, but considering I was, 12 at the time, and I'd been able to play every rare game up until that point, and wasn't able to play this one, I was a little bit filthy about it, and yeah, I just thought that, I think Banjo-Tooie is the greatest example of fitting that humor in without upsetting the senses or anyone too much, and I think the game is far funnier, Banjo-Tooie that is, for being funny like that without necessarily needing the higher rating. Another good example of someone who did this was Craig Ferguson on The Late Late Show, where he constantly pushed the boundaries of innuendo and whatever he could get away with, but still keeping it to that PG-13 or whatever it is in your country rating system, and it's far funnier for it. That's my opinion. What do you guys think? Alright, that's it. Catch you later.
Well, thank you for the call, DJ Cat. So, got a little bit of a dissenting opinion here about Conker's Bad Fur Day. Not necessarily a fan.
I can definitely see where he's coming from there. If you missed out on it and didn't get to play it until Rare Replay, and all you'd experienced about it is the sort of fan hype surrounding it, and you didn't kind of live through it at the time, I can super see how you'd be like, what, that's it? And I don't even want to say you're wrong necessarily. I think a lot of the fan nostalgia is sort of overblown for it these days.
Sure. I think it's a game that its legend kind of grew larger than what it actually was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think part of that is so few people got a chance to actually experience it. So word of mouth, and then it just snowballed from there.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said with the earlier call, humor is subjective, so I can definitely see, experiencing Conker's Bad Fur Day and being like, well, Banjo-Kazooie is way funnier than that, because what Banjo-Kazooie does is it kind of colors within the lines, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
It tries to push the boundaries while keeping that strict rating, ESRB or PEGI rating, where it, it's, or whatever, it's straight down the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And then it kind of becomes more subversive than Conker, which has a little bit more free reign to just go completely, it's subtlety and nuance versus just in your face. So
yeah,
I definitely see that.
And if one works for you, it works for you. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. And it's that's not wrong. You're allowed to enjoy different things, and you're not wrong for it. So, yeah.
Actually, I mean, I agree a lot. I find a lot of Banjo-Tooie to be funnier than Conker now. But I also was there when Conker came out, and I understand why Conker was such a big deal and was considered as subversive as it was at the time. So
yeah,
it's easy to me, as a comedy fan and semi-professional with an Emmy that's got dust on it.
Rub it in, why don't you?
I can't afford Emmy polish, Gibbon. That's my humble brag of the night. I do find nowadays subtlety to be funnier, but then Conker is full of things that make me laugh. I was mentioning, the whole Bachelor sequence where Conker's reactions to it. That's what's funny to me now with Bad Fur Day, rather than just pissing on fire imps, right? So,
yeah,
I think there's plenty to like in Bad Fur Day and find funny. It's just the stuff that people don't talk about as much.
Yeah. There's also the technical aspect. If you'd play this when it came out back in the day. It was very, very technically impressive, which I think may have added to the whole effect of playing it at the time, where you not just the sort of dissonance of this cute mascot platformer character being with the South Park style humor, but also the fact that the game was just really, really beautiful and impressive at the same time. Whereas playing it now, everything it does is kind of old hat. So you're just kind of looking at it and going, yeah, okay, what's so impressive? And so if you didn't kind of get that, if you didn't live through that, so to speak, you might you kind of miss out on the effect of that.
It was a bigger deal playing it on the N64 than it is playing it on the Xbox One.
Yeah.
Your other question about did Bad Fur Day contribute to Nintendo's decision not to buy Rare? I would say no. I don't think there was any direct correlation there. It was several factors. And, I can't say that I can speak with any great authority on any of this because I obviously wasn't there. Mostly it came down to the change in leadership at Nintendo, both in Japan and in America at the time. Ken Lobb, of course, left Nintendo of America too and joined Microsoft. So, Rare didn't have their traditional allies anymore at Nintendo, and they were asking to be purchased outright, and Nintendo, in this new regime, said no. And Ken Lobb, meanwhile, was at Microsoft pushing for yes. So...
Yeah. Like you said, a number of factors. You also brought up, were they so horrified at the content? And, we went over it a little bit in previous episodes. We're like, nah, they kind of thought it was hilarious, actually. And they A-okayed everything. Nothing was sprung on Nintendo secretly out of the blue for this project. They gave their blessing on all of it. Yeah, they didn't, promote it themselves, but they didn't blacklist it or anything either. They said, yeah, you're free to go ahead with this. Cool. Also, this peeing on Fire Imps is hilarious. Good job.
Yeah, the fact that the game actually saw release, I think, speaks to the fact that Nintendo really didn't have a problem with it. They were just apprehensive about how to promote it and who would actually be buying it. So
yeah.
Like I said, there's lots of different factors, and one day we will do a definitive episode on what led to the buyout and what led to this parting of the ways between Rare and Nintendo. Conker, I don't think plays any real role in that, though. All right, let's see. We got the next call, and it is a one-part call. So let's play it.
Yeah.
Hey, DK Vine Hotline, it's Ray Day Pinball here, and I just have one thing to say about the third part of the conversation, or the second half of the Conker game, and that's fuck that fucking war chapter and its fucking lasers and fucking beach sprint that's fucking impossible, and I fucking hate it. Alright, maybe not a little, that might have gone a little overboard, but in general, I actually find the first half of the game to be much more enjoyable than the second half. I might be alone in that, I don't know. I know you guys were praising the second half, but I don't know, after the night falls, it's just like movie parody after movie parody, and the game just drags, the war chapter just goes on forever. That said, still super fun to play, still love it. The spooky section is actually quite enjoyable. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know, I wish they would have just maybe laid off the war chapter just a little bit, because it just drags and goes on forever. But aside from that, great game and great experience, and thanks for doing it justice with this 3-part spotlight. All right, bye.
Thank you, Ray Day, also in the live stream chat, and giving Gibbon some validation for the bits of its war Gibbon hates.
Yeah, As I said, I generally agree that its work could have done with some fat trimming. Maybe bits of it went on a little overlong. Overall, a good, enjoyable chapter. Just, elevate it from good to great. Like when I was going through school for game development, there was that sort of strip away what is merely good so that you can leave behind what is truly great. So I think it maybe could have done a bit more with that.
You say that as we're nearing the 3 hour and 30-minute mark of our podcast.
I say that as the one who doesn't have to edit this.
And you wonder where my chronic fatigue originated.
It comes from you not delegating out anything.
It comes from me not being able to afford to pay you anything. So, ergo, not wanting to delegate. I can't even afford Emmy polish, Gibbon.
Oh, we need to start a GoFundMe for Hyle's Emmy polish.
I don't even know where to buy Emmy polish.
I'm gonna look it up.
So we have one final caller spread across 2 calls. So
Okay.
I like how my own inability to have a concise podcast has now trickled down. It's voodoo economics in audio form. It's trickled down to our callers now. They don't know how to rein it in. So we have the 3-minute capper on our DK Vine hotline, and they're like, "Nope, I'm gonna keep going." I am a terrible influence on our international audience. All right, let's play these calls back to back.
Hello there, Mr. Hyle Gibbon, and I am DK Vine. It is I. It is me. It is Brittle Nipples Kevin, and I am calling to say, boy, my nipples so chapped about this topic. No, not really. I love Conker's Bad Fur Day just as much as everybody. But man, as much as I do love it, there's always one sore spot to me, and that is the It's War chapter. All because of a game-breaking bug that I experienced. So basically what happened was, I made it all the way to the end of the chapter, where you're running along the beach. You gotta make it to the end, surviving, getting shot and everything. And get down to 1 chocolate bar left. And just as I make it to the beach, where the cutscene triggers, I got killed. Like literally right when the cutscene triggers, I got shot and died. And for whatever reason, like the cutscene played out, and then when it ended, I was right back at the beginning of that section where you have to run down the beach. There were no enemies or anything like that, so I could run completely down there, but I could go back to It's Windy, the main hub level and everything, but I couldn't progress any farther in the game. Like, it literally, where you go to trigger the Heist chapter, I couldn't get to it. So I had to replay the entire goddamn game over from scratch. And, oh my god, the It's War chapter is so freaking difficult, and to have to go through that again. Oh, but, so that was my lovely experience, and yeah. Anyways. Hey, did you know that there's a Matrix parody in the game? It's really subtle, you probably won't find it. I just wanted to let you know. Question though. Who do you think the programmer was that was so bad at their job? Do you think it was Chris Seaver, one of the stampers? I don't know. Let me know. Keep it on the hush. I don't want to get anybody fired. Anyways, this is Brent on Milk with Kevin. I love you. Hey, it's me again. Gizmo, stop it! Sorry. My dog is being a pain in the ass. What was I saying? Right. I don't know if you talked about it yet in this episode, because obviously I'm calling before. Whatever. Shut up. Damn it, my dog has thrown me all the fucking off. Pikachu, that's it. That's where. Did you talk about the Pikachu cutscene that was cut out? What was your feeling towards it? You think it was going to be too much? I don't know. I remember seeing you can find it on YouTube. I'm not surprised they cut it, but maybe it shouldn't have been cut. I don't know. So, talk about Pikachu for a little bit.
Thank you for the call, Brittle Nipples Kevin. The discoverer of all the James Bond titles in every Conversation episode in season 7. So Kevin brought up a couple good points here, a couple good topics of conversation. First of all, did you know about this game-breaking glitch?
I didn't. That sounds horrid. Oh my god.
It sounds like something that would happen to me, quite honestly. It's never happened to me, but I can empathize with you completely, because that feels like something that would befall me. I've experienced games where, something doesn't get triggered, and I just can't experience it, and I have to start the whole game over, and I hate it. Hate it. And, that's very close to what happened with me. This isn't a game-breaking glitch, because you can't really have a game-breaking glitch in Sea of Thieves, but at the end of the Shores of Gold, Tall Tales series, fighting the Gold Hoarder, and then, the Gold Hoarder killed me right when he died, and I missed the cutscene that happens afterwards, because I was on the ferry of the damned, and I reloaded back on the ship, respawned back on the ship, and I was locked out of the room and couldn't see it while my crewmates could. And to this day, I haven't seen it, and I am quite salty about it. But, so I empathize, even though this has never happened to me.
I empathize because I just hate that section in general. But we already talked about that.
We did. So what was the other points that Kevin brought up?
The Pikachu cutscene.
The Pikachu cutscene. Yes. So, do you want to explain this briefly, Gibbon?
Yeah. So, I think it's Ooga Booga. Yeah, it'd be in Ooga Booga when you first meet Don Weezo. When they do that, the boss wants to talk to you, and you fade to black, and we first meet Don Weezo, and he's sitting around with a couple of his subordinates and beats one of them to death with a bat. That cutscene was originally going to be involving Pikachu from Pokemon and some not very subtle Pokemon references. With Conker or Don Weezo saying something like, "Oh man, have you seen this? I gotta catch 'em all," sort of thing, before he beats Pikachu to death with a bat. And to quote one of the commenters from wrestling I was watching earlier this week, I know some writers who employ subtlety and they're cowards. And yeah, Nintendo drew the line at Pikachu being beat to death in the game.
Can't imagine why.
They asked for that scene to be removed. I think that's the only thing they asked to be censored in the entire game. They were fine with everything else. Yeah.
And that's why they decided not to buy Rare.
I'm kind of whatever about it. I don't think it's a big loss at all. I think that would have been one of those, this dates this section of the game things. You know?
I mean, I don't know. Pokemon's still super relevant to this day. I mean,
I guess.
Pokemon cards are selling out everywhere. Scalpers are grabbing them, selling them for hundreds of dollars.
That's true.
Pokemon Go is still a thing. Everybody's excited about the new ones for the Switch and Pokemon. I think where Nintendo probably and rightfully probably stepped in, like I would have liked that because this was also the era where DK Vine had artwork every month in our letters column where a DKU character would eviscerate Pikachu. So I would have liked it just fine in the game, but it's not just Nintendo, it's the Pokemon Company, Game Freak, like it's all these entities that have a stake in Pokemon, and you can't have Pikachu beat to death in a game for, in a game that's not Pokemon.
Yeah, and this isn't even like, Pikachus get beat up in Pokemon, but this was like graphically with a bat and blood and whatnot.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a bit much. I can understand why they asked for that to be removed.
And finally, the identity of the programmer.
I think it's Log.
So you're going for the completely in-universe perspective, where there's got to be an in-universe rationale behind it.
Well, like, why? Of course, we are presented with the answer. Log is the programmer of the DKU, so yeah, it's Log, obviously.
Yeah, I remember at the time having this fan wank where it was like the AI of the bank vault, and it just had like godlike powers. But as far as like if we're looking past that fourth wall, who would be the person on the team that it was supposed to be?
Oh, that'd be Pyle.
Pyle, yeah. I was thinking Pyle, yeah.
So yeah, Sean Pyle, who still collaborates with Chris Saver to this day. He was one of the primary programmers on Bad Fur Day, and praised as a technical wizard on that charity stream the other day by several.
Not a name that really comes up often enough when people discuss this game. Obviously, it's viewed, and for a lot of correct reasons, as this kind of auteur project. Like Chris Seaver took it over, and it's viewed as his baby, and also he voices Conker, so the two are kind of indistinguishable at this point. But yeah, Sean Pyle is a big reason why that game worked. Robin Beanland, of course, music and script. It's the game where Louise O'Connor got her start at Rare. Can't forget Chris Marlowe. So, I mean, so many people worked on it, and it was a collaboration. And, they didn't kill Conker at the end of Bad Fur Day. So, and we know now, they were hoping to do a sequel, Conker's Other Bad Day, that never got off the ground because I think Conker's Bad Fur Day sold dozens of copies. But no, that's not fair. It's Mr. Pants sold dozens of copies. It probably did as well as we could have expected it to do near the end of the N64's life, and with as little promotion, and with the barriers in front of it being an M-rated game with this pissing squirrel. I mean, like it obviously did well enough to become a cult classic, and I think that in and of itself should be this huge feather in the cap of everyone who worked on the game, because it is, Conker is an icon of gaming. Just because he's not going to be in Smash Brothers doesn't preclude that. I mean,
we don't know that yet. There's still a couple slots. It can happen.
No, I don't want to offend the Conker in Smash campaign on Twitter.
Which one? There's like 5 of them.
All right, the one that follows me and that I follow.
Okay, yeah.
It's funny because Conker's Bad Fur Day had, out of all DKU games, it really did have a definitive ending where Conker was kind of trapped in this. He got everything he wanted. If you would have asked him at the beginning of the game, he got everything he wanted in the worst possible way. Monkey's Paw.
Yeah.
He is king of the Panther Kingdom or Willow Woods or whatever the fuck it is. The Squirrel Kingdom now? I don't know, but he's king. He's got all the money and wealth and power, and he's absolutely miserable. And the game ends.
Yep.
And we have had 3-ish Conker games since then. We've had Live and Reloaded, which is basically an enhanced remake with multiplayer elements that serve as both a prequel and a sequel, but not really involving the character of Conker.
Yeah.
We have Conker's Big Reunion in Project Spark and Conker in Project Spark, which takes place 10 years after Bad Fur Day, but we only see the first chapter and we never got the rest. And, you know, you can potentially make the rest in Project Spark, but, you know, it's still kind of this, like, here's the beginning of this story and how it ends is up to you. So it's, you know, the canon after that gets clouded. And then we have Young Conker, which is an interquel between Conker's Pocket Tales and Conker's Bad Fur Day, for the HoloLens, which means that the only people who have played it are you and some person on YouTube and the people who developed it.
Yep, pretty much.
Yep, and so most people think Young Conker was canceled. It was not.
Yep.
It's a finished game.
I had to go correct that on so many wikis. I somehow ended up with admin rights to the Conker fandom wiki in the process.
It was only a matter of time anyway.
Yeah, I know.
Conker, of course, appeared in #IDARB. When I say of course, I mean from my perspective, of course, because I'm the only one who goes on and on and on about IDARB. But
I
Conker's
appreciate
an IDARB.
you going on about IDARB. It's a fun little thing.
Somebody has to go on about Conker fought Richard Nixon, so how can I not love that? And
Minecraft, of course.
Oh, Conker was also in Minecraft along with Banjo and Pinatas
and Greg.
Greg was there too. Yeah. Greg appeared in Minecraft. Birdie came back in Project Spark, and a bunch of Conker characters came back in Young Conker. But yeah, like aside from that, and of course Rare Replay, which just put Bad Fur Day on the Xbox finally. That wasn't Live and Reloaded Bad Fur Day. That's basically been it for Conker. And that being said, like I feel like it does a disservice to the legacy, saying like it never really got a real sequel. All plans, like real sequels, got canceled.
Yeah, like okay, big proper like Conker's Bad Fur Day 2 entry aside, like Conker's actually been rolled out more than Banjo has since the buyout.
Especially since the Renaissance, I feel like, you know, when you look past Banjo and Kazooie being in Smash, and all the hoopla around that.
It's admittedly pretty big, but yeah.
Pretty big. I'm not downplaying it, but I think since 2015, Conker has been, like, brought out more than Banjo has, at least as far as being like this kind of face of Rare a little bit. And it's kind of not been so much as of like the last year or two. I think Banjo and Kazooie have kind of retaken that crown from Conker's head. But yeah, for a while there, it was all about Conker, and it was just like, Conker had a little mini Renaissance within the Renaissance. So, you know, like Conker is still this weirdly like thriving, vital property, even if there's nothing to back it up so much in the modern day. Yeah,
it just bothers me when I see a lot of vocal people on Twitter being like, "Oh, Rare isn't using Conker," and it's like, they're using him all over the place. What are you talking about?
I mean, they're using him as much as they're using anything else. Like,
yeah, that's fair.
Sans like Battletoads, which got a new game last year, but you know, but it's funny to me, like, I feel like I am mostly content with Conker. Like, if we never got anything else, I wouldn't be hugely curious to see what's happening with Conker. Like, catching up with Conker, I don't really need to. I feel like Conker's story is more or less complete. And I think, like, I loved catching up with him in Big Reunion, but I don't need something like Conker's Other Bad Day where you would risk upending the ending to Bad Fur Day that's been in place for 20 years and like tarnishing the kind of like the status quo limbo the character has been in, which I think kind of works. I think it kind of works as like this downer ending, this like depressed state. I think it's a good complete character arc from Diddy Kong Racing to this. I'm happy with it.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from there. I wouldn't necessarily be disappointed if we never got like a Bad Fur Day follow-up in the way that a lot of people on Twitter want. I don't think I'd want Conker to stop showing up in other stuff.
Sure.
I like being able to trot him out in various other things. But yeah, I don't necessarily feel like I'd be majorly disappointed if we never got like another mainline Conker entry. He's got a nice like beginning. As you say, he's got a nice character arc that feels complete-ish.
He's got a beginning, middle, and end, and I feel like, well, you could explore the world a little bit more. It's funny, like, I was one of the ones on DK Vine who was like, I don't care about this multiplayer stuff that doesn't feature Conker. I want more of Conker's story. And now I'm like, no, I'd be fine seeing more of this SHC and the Teddies and the whole world around that, like getting medieval too, like prequels and far future sequels. Like I'm fine kind of leaving Conker alone, sort of. It's just funny how you wind up in a completely contrary opinion to where you were 15 years prior. But yeah, I mean, I think Conker is, like I said, he's an icon. He's an icon of 90s gaming, even if his big game was in 2001. It's still tail end of the N64, so he's kind of like lumped in to, with that era. And Rare is still keeping him alive with merchandise and appearances. The Royal Sea Squirrel ship set in Sea of Thieves. And Chris Sieber, Sean Pyle, they're still hard at work, Gory Detail.
Go by Rusty Pup.
Right. And yeah, like what more can we say about Conker's Bad Fur Day that hasn't been said?
Yeah, pretty much. Perico. Anyway.
No. But I mean, it did break some boundaries down for as far as like adult humor in games, and while like I think things like the PlayStation did more for like convincing, and weirdly the Game Boy Advance did more for like convincing like mainstream that video games were a perfectly acceptable pastime for adults. I think like Conker's Bad Fur Day did show like you can do whatever you like, because before Conker there was just trash like Leisure Suit Larry,
Oh god, yeah, the series where the action button is a zipper.
Yeah.
Yup.
So I feel like Conker like did more to make this type of humor accessible and acceptable.
Yeah. It's sort of, I don't know, I compare it to Roger Rabbit a lot, where it sort of subverted the like cartoons or this kiddie thing expectation and had some more adult themes and gravitas to it. It definitely inspired a lot of stuff that was like, oh hey, we can do edgy adult humor in cartoony things like early Xbox titles like Whacked. But I feel like they kind of missed the point Conker was going for. in retrospect. But yeah, it definitely sort of put in people's minds that, like, hey, we can do serious stories and not have them star, like, humans in business suits sort of thing.
Yeah.
Like, it opened people's options up, or made them realize that they had more options.
Yeah. And, ultimately, it did have the downside where Conker doesn't really interact. Well, he does. I mean, he appears in IDARB and Minecraft with the DKU characters, but I feel like for the longest time, Conker was kind of closed off to the rest of the DKU because it became this M-rated game. Obviously, we've talked about what it did to Diddy Kong Racing. It pulled it from store shelves, and even now, the original Diddy Kong Racing isn't available anywhere, and that's more rights issues that came about as a result of the buyout. But it was initially made unavailable because of Conker's Bad Fur Day. So I don't think you would have that segregation nowadays. I think Conker would be free to interact with the rest of the DKU, especially because Conker is shown, like, doesn't even have to be an M-rated property. It can be teen-rated. It can tone down its rating while still indulging in the same crude sensibilities that Bad Fur Day did.
Yeah.
As I mentioned before, Conker's Big Reunion was rated teen, and it has a sequence where Conker pisses all over Birdie. So
yeah,
sky's the limit, right?
Yeah, and despite what people think, young Conker is also teen and has sequences like tricking your way past a security guard by finding some good porn for him. So, yeah.
Now, I don't have a HoloLens, and I've never used a HoloLens. Do you have to find that porn in your own home?
No. What's going on is the security guard is in fact the satellite you are hacking with googly eyes. And you get a spy virus onto his network by inserting it into the Hot Dish Action magazines he's been downloading.
Well,
yep.
Now what?
No, it's a fun game. It's been fun doing these episodes. I enjoyed playing through it again and taking notes in preparation for all of this. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, and I'll invite you back when we do the 3-part Live and Reloaded Spotlight episode.
This has been a File 2 production.
Qué rico.